Chapter 1695. If my skills are not good enough and I lose, then I will give up the Moon Clan's empire. The Sun and Moon Clan will be one family. If I step down, there will be no more sect master of the Moon Clan. These words were powerful and resonant, but they were like a bolt of lightning that exploded in the crowd. Not to mention the Moon Clan. Even the Sun Clan felt that this surprise was like a tornado. Jin Xian was also shocked, but before he could react, the Moon Clan's camp was the first to disagree. Sect Master, you can't do this. Yes, Sect Master. How can you give up the empire? Swordsmanship, our Moon Clan doesn't have such a weak Sect Master. The Moon Clan doesn't have such a useless leader. There were more and more objections, and the scolding became more and more unpleasant. Although Lan Si and the rest were also shocked by her actions, they were still her people and tried to persuade the ministers. In a court, there were many camps and many factions. There were endless internal conflicts, but it was also a way to maintain the court. However, once they lost common interests, they would unite, just like now. High Priest, why are you still speaking up for her? If you don't have the ability, don't take on the porcelain job. If you don't have the confidence to win, why do you still want to issue a challenge? You're obviously giving the empire away. Sect Master might have her own difficulties. The Sun Clan is so arrogant. If she doesn't do this, the flames of war will continue. Let's fight. We can't allow the empire to be handed over to someone with a different surname. We can't coexist peacefully with the Sun Clan. The hatred between the Sun and Moon Clan can't be resolved. That's right. I thought that the Sect Master could lead us to prosperity like the previous Sect Master. I didn't think that the Moon Clan's foundation would be destroyed in her hands. If the previous Sect Master was still here, he would be angered to death. The objections became more and more intense. Even if there were people who spoke up for Swordsmanship, they were quickly drowned out by the anger. Chu Qingyan and company saw this and could not understand Swordsmanship's actions. Actually, such a bet that was not set up properly could be denied. What's more, from the looks of it, this was Swordsmanship's decision alone, and no one else knew about it. This made them even more confused. Xiao looked at the ice beauty who was being criticized by everyone and his heart ached. He strode forward and stood beside her, holding her hand as if this was the only way to support her. When she said this, she had already expected the result, so she wasn't too surprised. However, Xiao didn't hesitate to stand by her side, which made her feel a little touched. It turned out that when everyone was pointing fingers at her, there was someone who could stand by her side despite the abuse. This feeling was really good. Are you alright? What can I do for you? Swordsmanship felt that if there was anything in this world that she could not bear to part with, it would probably be the person beside her. At this time, when the Japanese heard the Yu people's insults, they woke up from their shock and joined the insults. You make it sound like we're robbing you. It's clearly your Sect Master who lost to us. Luckily Sect Master Gongsun knows what's good for him. Otherwise, we would have besieged the city tomorrow and your empire would have been ours sooner or later. What do you mean people with different surnames? Why didn't you say this when you took over our empire? Don't just let the officials do whatever they want but not the common people. At first it was just the Yu people arguing, but now that the Japanese were involved, the two sides began to fight. The civil officials were arguing, while the generals rolled up their sleeves and prepared for a big fight. Because Jin Xian and Gongsun Shui were smart enough to only bring a few hundred officials, the two sides retreated far away from the city, so it didn't cause too much chaos. But even so, the situation was getting out of hand. Jin Xian saw the public's anger and wanted to ask Gongsun Shui to make a new bet. For example, the two sides would not attack each other for 50 years, but the Japanese officials were already red in the face. He was afraid that if he said that, he would suffer the same fate as Gongsun Shui. He would be considered a traitor, so he could only swallow his words. His gaze turned from the audience to Gongsun Shui. To be honest, he really couldn't see through this person. No one would be so generous as to give up their empire. Chu Qingyan was a little worried that these people would explode and destroy the stage. Some people had already started fighting. If she wasn't pregnant and didn't have to worry about hurting herself, she would have clapped her hands and cheered for these people. This was the first time she had seen so many adults who didn't know martial arts fighting. Xiao Su reached out to protect his little wife. His brows were tightly furrowed. With so many people gathered below the stage, it would be difficult for him to take the little one away safely. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have listened to her suggestion and brought her to watch the fight. Seeing the situation getting worse, Xiao Su said coldly to Gongsun Shui, "Are you still not going to clean up? It will only get worse later." Xiao Su's words of reprimand stopped in his throat. When he saw Gongsun Shui standing there calmly as if everything was under control, the anger in his chest subsided by half. For Xiao Yao's sake, he wouldn't embarrass her. Otherwise, he would directly summon the Xiaolai cavalry and tie up these troublemakers directly. This was a small matter, he could still do it. Hearing this, Gongsun Shui looked in the direction of Xiao Su and saw that everyone was looking at her with different expressions. She thought that her actions just now must have frightened them. Feeling that the time was right, she nodded and then motioned for Xiao Yao to let go of her hand. Xiao Yao received the message in her eyes. Although he was reluctant, he still respected her and took a step back. However, he still stood by her side, using his actions to tell her that no matter what happened, he would protect her. Gongsun Shui saw that the situation was about to get out of control, and her anger had reached its peak. The time was ripe. She stood on the stage and suddenly spoke. Using her internal energy, she spread her voice across the entire drill ground. "Everyone, please don't be impatient. Quarreling won't solve the problem." This person's voice was like the spring rain that was silent and immediately extinguished most of the people's impatience. Those who could hold their own in the imperial court were of course smart. Just now they were just impulsive. Therefore they stopped their uncivilized actions, tidied their clothes, straightened their hair, and waited for Gongsun Shui's next words with a serious expression. "I heard your protest just now. The most problematic thing is that I gave the country to someone with a different surname, which is Lord Morong. I can't agree with this." When Gongsun Shui said this, many people were at a loss. Did the Lord take the wrong medicine? Did she know what she was talking about? Someone said disrespectfully, "Could it be that the Lord has taken a fancy to that pretty boy Morong and is ready to enter his harem? So she abandoned her family and country and is willing to be a concubine?" As soon as this person finished speaking, his chest was hit by a stone and he fainted from the pain. Xiao Yao clenched his fists. Daring to slander his wife, did he think that he was dead? However, a stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The minister's words made everyone understand Gongsun Shui's abnormality today. Was it really like this? The more and more people looked at her, the more suspicious Xiao Yao felt sorry for the ice beauty standing in front of him. He wished that he could take the blame for her. However, Gongsun Shui smiled and was unmoved. Instead, she threw out an even bigger stone and stirred up an even bigger wave. The reason why I said this is very simple. It is because the blood of the Gongsun family flows in Lord Morong's body. Chapter 1696. Not only were the members of the Sun Tribe and the Moon Tribe stunned when they heard that, but everyone on the stage was stunned as well. Especially Jin Xian. He looked at Gong Suanshui in shock and disbelief. At this time, Gong Suanshui's gaze also fell on him, her eyes full of sincerity. Jin Xian came to his senses, and his expression darkened. He sounded a little annoyed as he said, "Sect leader Gong Suanshui, I hope you're not joking. Even if you want to stabilize the situation, you don't have to do this." Many of the officials from the Moon Tribe agreed with him. They wanted her to not lie to them just to make them accept the fact that the Sun Tribe had annexed them. Otherwise, they would elect a new sect leader and remove her from her position. Gong Suanshui smiled faintly at Jin Xian. "I'm not joking, cousin." Many people were stunned when they heard her call him cousin. Was Morong Yunxian really related to the Moon Tribe? Cousin? Xiao Yao raised an eyebrow. Before Jin Xian could say anything, Gong Suanshui turned around to face the officials from the Sun Tribe and the Moon Tribe. Her voice was like an ancient bell that reverberated in everyone's hearts. "Morong Yunxian is indeed my cousin. His mother is called Gong Sunyan, and she is my father's older sister." As soon as he finished speaking, the noisy audience suddenly became dead silent. Gong Sunyan? Could it be Princess Gong, who has been missing for decades. But didn't she fall off a cliff? How did she become Murong Yunchuan's mother? No, the Sun tribe and the Moon tribe were at war with each other. How could she be related to the Murong tribe? Chu Qingyan and the others felt like there was too much explosive news for them to handle. However, as a qualified spectator, they still had to play their part and wait for the main character to solve the mystery. Jin Xian was just like everyone else. He was filled with questions. However, his question was, how could his mother be the princess of the Moon tribe? Sect leader Gong Suanxue, I hope you don't make up stories. Jin Xian tried his best to calm down as he spoke to Gong Suanxue in a serious tone. Gong Suanxue sighed softly. I never joke, and I definitely won't make up stories about things like this. She took a deep breath and slowly revealed the secret from back then. Gong Sunyan was skilled in both civil and military matters. She was the most outstanding princess in the Yu sect back then. The old sect master had already decided to let her become the next sect master. It was a pity that her third brother Gong Sunjing, who was Gong Sunfei's father, did not want her to inherit the position of sect master. Before passing on the position, he devised a scheme and ordered people to pretend to be bandits to cause trouble. At that time, Gong Sunyan was in the prime of her youth and wanted to make more contributions. Hence, she volunteered herself and fell into the trap. At that time, it was too late to react. She was forced down the cliff and her whereabouts were unknown. Thus, when everyone thought that the pearl of the generation had passed away, Gong Sunyan was saved by the passing young sect master Murong, who was also Murong Yunchuan's father. However, at that time, Gong Sunyan was seriously injured, and it was already half a year later when she woke up. At that time, something happened to Gong Sunyan, and the old sect master suspected that Gong Sunjing was the culprit. At that time, he did not have any evidence and could not investigate openly. After all, family scandals should not be aired in public. Thus, he secretly imprisoned Gong Sunjing and let him hang himself to protect his identity. After losing his beloved daughter and son, the old sect master fell ill and could not recover. In a short few months, he passed the position of sect master to his second son, who was Gong Sunshue's father. Then he passed away. Thus, when Gong Sunyan woke up, everything had changed. She blamed herself for causing her father's death. However, at this time, the situation in the court had already been decided. A new sect master had ascended the position. She was also crippled of her martial arts and her body was weak. At the same time, she fell in love with Murong Yunchuan's father. Thus, she acquiesced to the rumors. Because she knew that once she appeared, the courtiers who supported her would definitely stand on her side. Then, it would make things difficult for her second brother, who was born of the same mother. Thinking that her second brother's ability was not inferior to hers, she felt assured and handed the Yu clan to him. Thus, she changed her identity and abandoned her identity as Princess Xian. However, there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. At that time, Gong Sunjing bribed the person who delivered the medicine and faked his death to get away. He also learned of Gong Sunyan's whereabouts and told Suyu about it. However, Gong Sunjing was still exposed. During the pursuit, he accidentally fell off his horse and died. Because the old master's order was a secret, it didn't affect Gong Sunjing's wife. That was why the disaster was buried. At that time, Gong Sunjing's wife was also a ruthless character. She plotted a conspiracy with her father. First, she got rid of Gong Sunshue's father and held the power in her hands. When she learned that Murong Yunchuan's father was fond of beauties, she catered to his fancy and used others to send him countless beauties. She secretly sent a mole into the Murong manor. In the end, that was the source of the Murong clan's tragedy. It was also the beginning of the Sun clan's total destruction. What happened after that, everyone present knew. The story Gong Sunshue told was full of ups and downs. Not only did she reveal the secrets of the imperial family, but she also revealed the truth of the war between the Sun clan and the Moon clan. This series of news shocked everyone present so much that they could not react for a while. Because many people present were witnesses to the events of the past, when Gong Sunshue talked about the past, they could relate many things to it. But these things were too coincidental and too unbelievable. After many people digested the news, Their first thought was that it was all made up and could not be trusted. How could there be so many coincidences in the world? Chu Qingyan tried to pry off her big ice cube's hand and pinch the flesh on his arm. She asked stupidly, "Does it hurt?" Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. "I can tell you with absolute certainty that this is not a dream." Chu Qingyan sighed. "I thought that this kind of dramatic story only existed in novels. I didn't expect it to be real. No wonder people say that novels originate from life, but they also surpass life." Xiao Su did not comment. Jinqin did not doubt her like the other officials who questioned her, because the things she said happened to coincide to some extent with the signs his mother showed when he was young and got along with her. For example, his mother once said that her hometown was the capital of the Sun clan. For example, his mother knew martial arts and knew how to rule a country. For example, his mother once told him that he had a cousin. If there was a chance in the future, she would bring him back to meet his ancestors. Those memories came back to him as Gongsun Shui spoke. He could not help but stare blankly at the person standing not far away. No wonder he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity when he first saw her. Gongsun Shui had already expected that even if she told the truth, many people would not believe her. So she threw out her trump card. "Everyone, there is no need to argue. I have a witness here. If you don't believe the witness, I have material evidence." Everyone instantly fell silent, waiting for her evidence to be presented. She curled her lips. "Wei Yu, bring her here." Chapter 1697. Lan Si had been so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth when his sect master had said that shocking secret. Now that he saw her call Wei Yu up, everything seemed to have been calculated. He stared dumbfoundedly at the ink-haired woman in snow-white clothes on the stage, suddenly understanding what she had said before. So that was what the successor meant. His sect master would not be muddle-headed when it came to important matters. Although he was very unwilling to let Jiang Shan merge with the Sun clan, he could not drag his sect master down at this time. Thus, Lan Si immediately said a few words to his aides, and told them to go down and persuade the court officials. At the very least, they could not let them ruin their own people's stage. Just as Lan Si was about to move, Wei Yu had already brought someone up. That person was covered in filth and looked extremely pathetic, but there were still people who recognized him. "Isn't that Elder Su? It's actually Su Yu." When Turin, Hualing, and the others heard this name, they immediately gripped their weapons. Their eyes were like torches, as if they wanted to stare a hole through that person. This person was the main culprit who hurt Feng Ling. It would not be too much to cut him into pieces. Soon, Wei Yu brought her people up to the stage. Su Yu felt the killing intent from the stage, and couldn't help but shrink his neck and kneel down obediently. Gong Suanxue gave Wei Yu a look. Wei Yu understood and said to the people on and off the stage, "Everyone is not mistaken. This person is Su Yu, the one who plotted to kill Princess Chang, and took over as sect master Gong Suanxue. In the end, he betrayed the Moon clan, and started the war between the Sun clan and the Moon clan. Su Yu, you were also below the stage just now. Do you have anything to add to the things I said?" Gong Suanxue asked coldly. Su Yu wanted to checkmate her at this time, but unfortunately, Wei Yu had given him poison before he went up on stage. If he dared to lie, then what awaited him would be a life worse than death. Moreover, his wife and children would die without a burial ground. When he thought of this, he did not dare to disobey. "That's right, everything you said is true. Princess Chang's death, your father's death, they were all planned by me. It's a pity that I let this brat escape back then. Even when I sent people to Sichuan, they did not eliminate you completely. This is my only failure." When Su Yu said this, he glared fiercely at Jin Xian. With that said, Jin Xian remembered that the person who had chased him all the way to the Sichuan was none other than the person in front of him. Jin Xian narrowed his eyes. If it weren't for the fact that the person in front of him was still a little useful, he would have turned him into ashes to avenge his mother and master. Sensing the cold killing intent coming from Jin Xian, Su Yu was so scared that he shrunk his neck back. Then, like spilling beans, he spilled out all the bad things he had done. As the person involved, Su Yu naturally spoke in detail, leaving no loopholes. Even those who wanted to talk nonsense could not find any flaws. Moreover, The things that happened back then were not without clues. The old officials who supported Princess Chang's ascension to the throne were still in the imperial court. They had long suspected Princess Chang's sudden disappearance. Now that Su Yu's details matched up, many people's eyes turned red and wanted to tear him apart. After Su Yu spoke a lot, Wei Yu also took out the letters he had secretly contacted back then. These letters spanned more than 10 years. Some of them were already yellowed, while others were still very new. They had his seal on them, so they could not be faked. Not only were the crowd amazed, but there was also probably no case that could have such detailed witness and material evidence. Apart from the crowd, Su Yu looked at Gongsun Shui in horror. When did you get these letters? I clearly remember that they were burned. Could it be that she had already planted a spy in his identity? Su Yu suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. How shrewd was this person? She even managed to fool him. Gongsun Shui smiled coldly. She did not want to talk to him anymore. She waved her hand and had someone take him away. At this point, the truth was already set in stone. With such conclusive evidence, no one dared to doubt it anymore. Gongsun Shui glanced at the different expressions on the crowd's faces and curled her lips. Then she waved her hand and had someone bring a bowl filled with water. There was a dagger on the plate. The bloodline of the imperial family cannot be recognized carelessly. Otherwise, the ancestors will not be at peace in the underworld. Therefore, to eliminate everyone's concerns, I will do one last verification. Blood identification. Once these 4 words were said, everyone expressed their approval. Jin Xian looked at the woman slowly walking towards him, a touch of softness in his eyes. In fact, there was no need for blood identification. He already believed that the person in front of him was his sister. But since it was something she wanted to do, he would go along with it. I'm sorry. In order to shut everyone's mouths and prevent people from making a fuss about this matter in the future, I came up with this once and for all method. I'm sorry you have to suffer. Gongsun Shui sincerely apologized to him. Jin Xian smiled and shook his head. It's okay. As he spoke, he took the dagger and made a cut on his finger. Soon, a drop of blood fell into the water. Then he handed the hilt of the dagger to her. Gongsun Shui took it and made a cut without hesitation. Xiao, who was used to seeing bloody scenes, was extremely distressed at that cut. After a drop of blood fell from her finger, he hurriedly took her hand and sprinkled the medicine he had prepared on her finger. Gongsun Shui could not dissuade him and let him go. Chu Qingyan, who had only seen blood identification on television, came over curiously. Although many people in the modern era doubted this practice, after living here for so many years, she was still in awe of many ancient practices. It's fusing! It's fusing! Chu Qingyan exclaimed. The 2 drops of blood floated in the water. Soon, they attracted each other and fused together. When Gongsun Shui saw this, she waved her hand and had someone take the bowl away so that the officials of the Sun Clan and Moon Clan could take a look. After a while, when no one objected, Gongsun Shui clasped her hands behind her back and spoke in a cold voice. Murong Yunxuan's identity has been confirmed. He is indeed Princess Luo's son. Princess Luo, my aunt, was supposed to be the successor of the clan leader. Now, I am simply returning the position to its rightful owner. After today's competition, everyone can see that Murong Yunxian is skilled in both civil and military matters. He has Princess Luo's demeanor. He will do a better job than I do in the Moon Clan. The Sun Clan and the Moon Clan have been in constant conflict for the past 100 years. Now that such an opportunity has appeared and such a successor has appeared, it is a blessing for the Sun Clan and the Moon Clan. The Sun Clan and the Moon Clan have always been one family. Perhaps this is the guidance given to us by the gods. The Sun Clan and the Moon Clan should put aside their grudges and mend their relationship. The blood of the Murong clan and the Gongsun clan flows in Murong Yunxuan's body. With the blood of both clans, he will be the future leader of the Sun Clan and the Moon Clan. No one could refute Gongsun Shui's words. Because no one could refuse such an outstanding leader. Everyone bowed their heads in unison. Greetings, Leader Murong. Gongsun Shui felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She bowed with the others. She had finally achieved what she wanted. Chapter 1698. Jin Xian had just digested the news that Gongsun Shui was his sister when the news of him becoming the leader of the Sun and Moon clans came. He subconsciously wanted to reject this identity, but Gongsun Shui did not give him the chance. She waved her hand and asked Wei Yu to present the seal of the US sect, as well as all the items that signified the US sect master. He looked at Gongsun Shui, who was already prepared. Her clear eyes were filled with expectations and pleading, making it impossible for him to reject. He could only agree. Everyone returned to the residence amidst the cheers of the two clans. Because Gongsun Shui had been surrounded by Lan Si and the others the moment she arrived at the viewing platform, Chu Qingyan and the others only met her after they entered the residence. Gongsun Shui knew that they had many questions to ask her, so she went to the meeting hall as soon as she entered the residence. Everyone was still discussing what had just happened. Once they saw her enter, they immediately quieted down. Miss Gongsun, I didn't think that you would be Jin Xian's sister. This turn of events is too unexpected. Chu Qingyan went up to her when she entered. She was both surprised and happy. Yeah, why didn't you tell us back then? You made me worry about you for so long. Xiao also moved closer, his face full of grievance. Gongsun Shui saw that everyone treated her like an outsider, and was a little touched. She said apologetically, I'm sorry, I had no choice. Chu Qingyan hurriedly waved her hand. It's all right. I thought that Jin Xian had no relatives in this world. Now that he has a sister like you, it's simply too great. But when did you find out about this? Everyone fell silent as they waited for Gongsun Shui's answer, because this question was also what they were puzzled about. Gongsun Shui's eyes flashed. She wanted to dodge the question, but Jin Xian was also looking at her with shining eyes. He must be very curious as well. She thought about it and sighed in her heart. Then she slowly confessed, I also found out when cousin returned to the Sunblaze sect and sent people to investigate his identity. Everyone was shocked. Didn't she already know? Then why didn't you tell him back then? Jin Xian stood up and walked in front of her. His expression was very solemn. She knew that if she told the truth, everyone would definitely have such doubts. She clasped her hands behind her back, a helpless expression on her face. At that time, the Yu clan was plagued by internal and external troubles. In addition, the trap I set for the Su family had yet to be closed. Every step was arduous, and I had no time to meet you. So, I hope you can understand. Xiao chimed in from the side. The Ice Beauty is right. Don't look at how the Yu clan has submitted to her now. In the previous period, the imperial court was extremely chaotic. It's all thanks to her that we managed to turn the tide. Otherwise, it would have been too difficult for the Yu clan to maintain stability under the natural and man-made disasters. Gong Suanshua looked at him helplessly, then said to Jin Xian, Don't listen to his nonsense, it's not that exaggerated. But it was really quite chaotic at that time, and I felt that I couldn't take care of the Japanese, so I couldn't take care of them. You were able to take care of them, so you did me a big favor and did a good thing for the people. Jin Xian reluctantly accepted this reason, but he thought of something and frowned again. If that's the case, why set up a competition? The two of us can openly reveal our identities. Why do you have to do something so superfluous? Seeing that he had asked this question, Gong Suanshua's expression became a little evasive. I also want to compete with you, to see if Aunt Chong's son is as outstanding as she was back then. Jin Xian nodded, then thought of something. No. If you want to compete, we can do it anytime, anywhere? Why must the Sun clan and the Yu clan be the stakes? And how do you know that I will definitely win? Today on the spectator stand, the things that she had asked Wei Yu to present could not have been so complete if she had not prepared them beforehand. How could the leader of a clan carry those things around with her? Unless she had already predicted that he would come to Luoqing, and that she would lose. If she continued to evade, these questions would only increase. Gong Suanshua met the questioning gazes of the crowd and sighed softly. Just like what I said at the drill ground today, because the hatred between the Sun clan and the Yu clan runs too deep, we need an opportunity to resolve it. However, opportunities are also created by people. If we do not reveal your identity in such a way, The officials of the two clans will not easily believe us. Furthermore, after everyone has witnessed your abilities, when you ascend to the throne, there will be fewer objections. Jin Xian asked again. But why are you so sure that I will take over the position of leader? Gong Suanxue looked at him with a determined gaze. Because if the Sun clan and the Yu clan do not have any objections, the person who becomes the leader must be able to convince them wholeheartedly. Your abilities do not need to be mentioned, and your identity as the son of the previous leader of the Yu clan, and as the current leader of the Sun clan, you are the best candidate. Jin Xian was speechless. He felt as if she had missed something. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he looked at her blankly. Wait, I remember now. When I was fighting with Su Yu's army, the bridge they used to retreat suddenly collapsed, and their escape route was cut off. I've looked into it. That bridge was man-made. Did you send someone to do it? And last time, their rations were mysteriously lost. That was also your doing, wasn't it? Gong Suanxue looked into his eyes and smiled. It was me. As soon as she finished speaking, the crowd was once again shocked by her shocking words. Chu Qingyan understood that Gong Suanxue had planned all of this a long time ago. Perhaps when Jin Xian and Su Yu fought, or even earlier, Gong Suanxue had already started planning. Who would have thought that a woman who was not even 20 years old would have such courage and ability? It was simply amazing. Why did you do this? Xiao was also stunned. If she had not intervened, the Japanese would not have attacked here so quickly. What was she thinking? He felt that he could not understand her at all. At this point, Gong Suanxue felt that she might as well confess everything. She looked at Jin Xian and said seriously, I've been thinking about this plan for several years. I can't watch the Su family control the court and North Korea fall into poverty. If you hadn't appeared, perhaps I wouldn't have put this plan on the agenda, and would have implemented it in a few years. Perhaps this is an opportunity given by God to unify North Korea and stop it from falling apart. That's why I sent someone to help you. In fact, with your ability, it's only a matter of time before you win, but I can't wait that long. Jin Xian was in disbelief. He did not expect that she would silently drag him into the trap. He asked the last question. Since you're so smart, why didn't you unify North Korea yourself? Instead, you gave the position to me? Gong Sunshue's heart skipped a beat when she heard this question. She had finally asked this question. She opened her mouth to say something, but suddenly, her vision began to blur. In a daze, she seemed to hear Xiao Yao's panic screams. She might not be able to hold on. Chapter 1699. No one expected Gong Suanxue to suddenly vomit blood and collapse. Xiao Yao, who was the closest to her, was the first to react. He reached out to catch her tottering body, his expression panicked. Ice Beauty, what's wrong? Don't scare me. However, the person in his arms had already lost consciousness and fainted. No matter how he called out, there was no response. Xiao Su was the calmest. As soon as this happened, he immediately said, Second brother, take her to the room. Huoling, go to Fengling and call Ethereal and Yanluo over. Xiao Yao immediately reacted. He pushed away Qiufeng and the others who wanted to help him, and directly carried Gong Suanxue to his courtyard. Second young master Xiao, where are you taking our sect master? Our high priest is coming. Qiufeng shouted twice. When she realized that he had already left like a whirlwind, she couldn't care less and immediately followed after him. Although the situation between the Sun and Moon clans was very clear, Lan Si still couldn't accept the Morong clan unifying the two clans. So when Gong Suanxue went to the meeting hall, he didn't go over. However, he didn't expect to receive news that something had happened to her in such a short time. He staggered over with his people. Ethereal and Yanluo arrived at the same time. When Lan Si saw that they were about to take the sect master's pulse, he waved his hand and signaled for the imperial physician beside him to come forward. Our sect master's illness must have flared up. This is the physician who has treated our sect master over the years. Ethereal and Yanluo looked at each other. Since he was the physician in charge, he should be more familiar with the situation. Thus, they retreated and allowed the physician to take her pulse. Xiao Yao pulled the physician to the bed and anxiously urged, "Quick, take a look. She's been unconscious ever since she vomited blood." The physician didn't dare to delay. He put down the medicine box and reached out to take her pulse. As soon as he felt her pulse, he revealed a shocked expression. "What's going on? Why is our sect master's illness so serious? It shouldn't be. She should be able to drag it out for at least half a year." Everyone held their breaths and waited for the result. They didn't want to hear this bad news. Xiao Yao was stunned. He didn't care about the fact that they could drag it out for at least half a year. He directly grabbed the physician's lapel and shouted angrily, "What do you mean? What's her situation now?" The doctor was already old and couldn't take the sudden move. He couldn't breathe and his face turned red. Fortunately, Xiao Su was there. He reached out and grabbed the doctor's wrist. He said sternly, "Second brother, let go." Xiao Yao was extremely flustered in his heart, but after hearing his imperial brother's words, he regained a bit of his rationality and hurriedly let go of his hand. After the doctor was released, he coughed and gasped for air. Not only was Xiao Yao flustered, Lan Si also walked in front of the doctor in disbelief. "Lord Lu, what do you mean by this? What's wrong with the sect master?" Everyone present had a higher status than Dr. Lu. Moreover, this was an urgent matter, so he did not dare to delay. "If I'm not mistaken, sect master has already begun to fall ill 10 days ago. More importantly, sect master seems to have taken some kind of medicine, which caused his condition to worsen. Now his body is beginning to dry up." Qiufeng, who was standing at the side, almost went limp when she heard this. She cried and said, "Before today's competition, the sect master took some medicine. He said it could restore one's body to its peak condition." Lan Si angrily rebuked, "Nonsense. Why didn't you stop him? Moreover, sect master's condition is so serious. There must be something wrong with her daily life. How did you take care of her?" Qiufeng knelt heavily on the ground, tears streaming down her face. Sect master did not allow this subordinate to spread the news. She said that after everything was over, she would properly nurse her body back to health. This subordinate was negligent. This subordinate is guilty. Jean Xian stared blankly at the pale woman on the bed. So today he was not mistaken. She really was holding on. He had just found out that he had a younger sister. Was he going to lose her again? At this moment, Xiao Yao saw the painful expression on that snow-white face. His heart ached and he reprimanded everyone. Now is not the time to pursue responsibility. "Lord Lu, no matter what method you use, hurry and save her for me." Although Dr. Lu did not know who he was, some people were born to be kings. His every move revealed an aura that ordinary people did not have. Dr. Lu could not help but feel fear. He immediately obeyed his orders and began to administer the medicine. Dr. Lu took out a bottle of medicine from his medicine box and fed it to Gongsu and Xue. After a while, that pale face regained some color, but it was only a little. However, the pain on her face lessened by quite a bit. Xiao Yao's heart was just about to relax when he was stunned by Dr. Lu's next words. Dr. Lu stopped and turned to Lan Si, saying in a sorrowful voice, "High Priest, you also know that sect master's illness has been acting up more and more frequently in recent years. Even so, the medicine we developed can still suppress it. However, this time, I'm afraid it won't be able to suppress it. At most, it can only alleviate the pain. However, the illness will continue to worsen." Lan Si's expression changed abruptly. "Don't tell me she doesn't even have half a year left?" Dr. Lu looked at the person on the bed and shook his head heavily. "At most 3 months, but it's also possible that at any time." These words were like a stone thrown into a calm pool of water. The ripples caused by these words shook everyone's hearts for a long time. This bolt from the blue stunned Xiao Yao completely. Impossible. She was still so young. How could she only have 3 months left? How could she possibly die at any time? Xiao Yao thought of something and let go of his hand. He turned around and pulled Ethereal to the bed. "Ethereal, your medical skills are excellent. Quickly take a look and see if they're telling the truth." Ethereal didn't dare to refuse. He sat down on the spot Dr. Lu had vacated and felt her pulse. After a moment, he withdrew his hand and glanced at Yin Luo. Yen Luo received his signal, and immediately went forward to feel her pulse. However, in the end, the two of them looked at each other and shook their heads at Xiao Yao in unison. Xiao Yao couldn't accept this result. He couldn't help but take a step back. Is there no way? Ethereal looked at the person in front of him sympathetically. It's not much different from what Lord Lu said. Miss Gongsuan's body is gradually deteriorating like a flower in autumn. As soon as he finished speaking, the room fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at the person on the bed. It was hard to imagine that this beautiful girl's body was deteriorating like a withered flower. Xiao Yao walked slowly to the bed. Ethereal and Yen Luo stood up and made way for him. He sat down on the bed with his back to everyone. His voice was as cold as water. "Get out, all of you, get out." Xiao Su frowned. He wanted to say something, but when he saw the situation, he knew that no matter what he said, he wouldn't listen. In the end, he took the lead and walked out of the room. Ethereal and Yen Luo followed closely behind. Lan Si and the others didn't want to leave, but leaving too many people in the room wasn't good for the patient. In the end, they left in grief. Jean Xian stood by the bed for a while. In the end, he clenched his hands and closed his eyes. He walked out with a heavy expression. Only Xiao Yao and Gong Sun Shui were left in the room. Xiao Yao looked at the person on the bed. He reached out and caressed her face. He tried to smile, but his eyes slowly turned red. "Ice Beauty, are you joking with me?" Chapter 1700. The person on the bed remained unmoved, quietly sleeping. If not for those diagnoses, Xiao Yao would have thought that his Ice Beauty was just sleeping, and that everything would be fine when the sun rose. His hand moved from her face to her head, caressing her black hair. His eyes were red, but he became even gentler. "It's all right, isn't it just an illness? There are medicines in this world for all illnesses. We're not afraid, I'll cure your illness." No matter what he said, the person on the bed did not respond. However, it seemed that if he did not say anything, he would feel uncomfortable. In the end, he held her hand and spoke more and more. If Gong Suanxue was awake, she would have noticed that his hand was trembling. That was because he was trying his best to suppress the fear in his heart. He said so many words, seemingly to comfort her, but in fact, he was also convincing himself. "Ice Beauty, the outside world is so beautiful, I haven't taken you to see it yet. Do you still remember the big plate chicken I told you about last time? I was planning to take you to eat it," he said in a daze, not knowing what he said. It was as if that was the only way he could feel better. In the end, he pressed his face against the back of her hand, murmuring deeply, "Ice Beauty, wake up and look at me, okay? Don't leave me, okay?" He did not know if the unconscious Gong Suanxue heard these words, but Xiao Su and Chu Qingyan, who were standing outside the door, heard them. Because Chu Qingyan was pregnant, she did not dare to squeeze in during the chaotic situation just now, even though she was anxious. She only came to visit now, but she met the people who were chased out by Xiao Yao. Everyone else had left, leaving only her and Big Ice Cube behind. The voices inside were not loud, but the two of them had profound inner strength, so they heard every word. "Is it serious?" she asked the person beside her with a worried expression. Xiao Su nodded. Ethereal said that the illness has entered the heart, and the life force is constantly flowing away. She may wake up today, or she may fall asleep forever in the next moment. Chu Qingyan widened her eyes. "Is there no way?" "No." Xiao Su's low voice continued to ring out. She felt a lump in her throat, and threw herself into Xiao Su's arms. Her voice was sorrowful as she said, "How could this be? I thought the clouds had parted and the moon was shining brightly." Xiao Su hugged her small body tightly and sighed softly, but he didn't know what to say to comfort her. Originally, he thought that there was a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, but he didn't know that there was no way out. Ethereal also mentioned one more thing during the treatment. Whether or not the patient could wake up depended on the patient's desire to live. If the patient did not have any attachments and did not have a strong desire to live, then it was very likely that the patient would continue to sleep. Everyone thought back to what she had done over the past few days. When she handed the Sun-Moon race and Sun-Moon race over to Jean Xian, she probably had nothing left to worry about. And so Gong Suanxue slept for 3 days. Xiao also stayed by her side for 3 days. Because no one knew when she would wake up, and no one knew if she would stop breathing in the next moment. So Xiao couldn't and didn't dare to leave. It was as if he didn't know what fatigue was. He kept talking to her about the interesting things he had experienced when he was young, about the prosperity of the Sichuan, and all the beautiful things in the world. He wanted her to be attached to this mortal world. It was as if he was saying, "Look, this world is so beautiful. There are good food, beautiful scenery, and so many people who care about you. So open your eyes and take a look. Don't sleep anymore." When the Emperor Emeritus found out that the idiot had not slept for 3 days and 3 nights, he brought Father Chu over to force him to go back to sleep. However, they heard his voice at the door. The two of them stood outside in a daze for an hour, but didn't go in. The Emperor Emeritus looked a little pitiful. "I know this idiot talks a lot, but I didn't want him to talk so much." Father Chu looked at the tightly shut door, and his expression became serious for once. Maybe that ice beauty will find him too noisy and beat him up when she wakes up. Then she'll nag him like Tang Sanzang. If it was in the past, the Emperor Emeritus would definitely ask him who Tang Sanzang was. At this time he sighed faintly and said, "It's good if she can really be woken up. Let's go." "Aren't you going to drag him out?" Father Chu was already prepared to roll up his sleeves and go all out. He was a little confused when he heard this. Didn't he ask him to help? "No, I'm old and can't handle it. Let the young people do it. Let's go drink." When he heard that there was wine to drink, Father Chu immediately rolled up his sleeves and walked in front. Go, 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 let's drink. Wine can relieve 1,000 worries." The Emperor Emeritus looked at the bouncing person in front of him and shook his head with a smile. He didn't know if this person was really stupid or stupid. It was late at night, and the entire residence fell into silence. In a courtyard, the candlelight was warm, illuminating the room with a warm glow. Xiao felt that the night wind was getting stronger, so he asked someone to add a heater. Then, he sat down again and leaned against the bedpost, quietly staring at the person on the bed. "It started snowing yesterday. The snow is so beautiful. If you wake up, I'll make a snowman for you, okay? Today, Kong came to see you. He said that if you continue to laze around in bed, you'll be a bad child. Ice Beauty, you've already slept for 3 days. If you continue sleeping like this, I'll pull your ear and wake you up." He pretended to speak casually, but just like the past 3 days, he still didn't get any response. No matter how strong a person's mind was, after holding on for so many days, their spirit would collapse. The ethereal said that if she didn't wake up in 3 days, then Xiao could no longer force a smile. He held her hand tightly, and pain filled his eyes bit by bit. "Ice Beauty, wake up and look at me, okay?" The famous King Xiao didn't have his usual carefree appearance. He looked sad and troubled by love. Knowing that he wouldn't get a response, Xiao lowered his eyes, trying to restrain his emotions. He didn't want to affect her, even if he knew that she couldn't see. Just as he lowered his head, Gong Xuanxua's hand moved slightly. Xiao thought he heard the rustling of clothes and thought that he was hallucinating. Suddenly, there was a weight on the top of his head, as if something warm had covered it. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He couldn't control his trembling fingers and slowly raised his head. Until he met that pair of watery eyes, he felt as if countless fireworks had exploded in his head. He opened his mouth, but couldn't speak because he had been talking nonstop for days. She said softly, "You're so noisy. You're making me unable to sleep peacefully." He subconsciously wanted to apologize, but he saw tears welling up in her eyes, wetting her cheeks. Xiao reached out and hugged her tightly. His voice was hoarse and choked with sobs, but it was full of threat. "I'll disturb you. Let's see if you dare to leave me to sleep alone. You being able to wake up is the greatest joy of my life." Chapter 1701. When Gong Xuanxua woke up on the last night, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They could finally have a good night's sleep. The next day, Ethereal, Cheng Yanluo, and Dr. Lu appeared in the room to treat Gong Xuanxua. However, there was nothing they could do. Just like what was said in Buddhism, there was no escape from the 8 tribulations of life. Gong Xuanxua was currently experiencing one of those tribulations. However, compared to her pale complexion yesterday, her complexion was quite good today. After everyone greeted her warmly, Gong Xuanxue's gaze swept over everyone, and finally landed on Jin Xian. "Can I speak to you alone?" Jin Xian naturally agreed, but Xiao Yao stood aside with a scowl. "I want to stay too." Gong Xuanxue's gaze drifted over, and Xiao Yao admitted defeat. When he walked out, he chased everyone out. "Have a seat." Jin Xian sat down on the chair in front of her. Gong Xuanxue smiled. "I heard that you were called Jin Xian before?" "Yes, master gave me that name. I don't intend to change it." Jin Xian replied gently. "That's a good name." She nodded. "Then I'll call you cousin Jin Xian." "As you wish." Jin Xian only felt pity for his sister, who had spent so much effort for the country. Gong Xuanxue looked at the man sitting upright in front of her. She was very pleased that Aunt Chong had left behind such a good seedling for the Morong family. She thought of her own illness, and went straight to the point. "Cousin Jin Xian, I'm very sorry that I handed over the Sun and Moon tribes to you without any discussion. If I had more time, I wouldn't have done it. Ever since I talked to you that day, I knew that your ambition wasn't here. Not everyone yearned for imperial power." As she spoke, a bitter smile appeared on her face. "But as you can see, I don't have much time left. I can't drag this out any longer. I can only come up with this plan, which is to use the fastest and most direct method to merge the two races. However, there's a drawback to this method, which is that there will be a lot of friction in the future. After all, it's not a gradual process. The merging of the Sun and Moon race officials is a big problem. I know I'm forcing you to do something you don't want to do, but we have the blood of the royal family in us. We can't just sit by and watch the commoners fall into the abyss of suffering, so I can only do this. Cousin Jin Xian, I'm really sorry." Jin Xian looked at his sister who was lying on the bed. Her life was hanging by a thread, but she still did not forget the common people. He was extremely shocked. "I don't blame you." Although his original intention was to reorganize the Japanese and then leave with his master, after experiencing all this and seeing his sister struggling on the verge of death, he slowly changed his mind. "Don't worry, I'll protect North Korea for you." This sentence was very soft, but it represented the promise of a 9-foot-tall man. Gong Xuanxue did not expect him to agree so quickly. Her eyes reddened. "Cousin Jin Xian." Jin Xian smiled and raised his hand to stroke her hair. "It wasn't easy for Big Brother to have a little sister. You have to live well. Otherwise, Big Brother really won't have any family in the future." Gong Xuanxue smiled and nodded. Tears fell from her eyes. However, on the same day, Gong Xuanxue fell into a deep sleep again. Xiao Yao had just breathed a sigh of relief, but his heart was in his throat again. This time, Gong Xuanxue's condition worsened. Even the medicine could not alleviate her pain. Seeing her frown even though she was unconscious, it was obvious that she was in great pain. Xiao Yao could not sit still anymore. "Ethereal, hurry up and think of a way. Didn't you save my third sister-in-law back then? You have to work harder." Looking at his second brother who was holding on to Ethereal tightly, Xiao Su could not stand it anymore. "Second brother, calm down." Xiao Yao turned to look at him sadly. "Big brother, I can't calm down. That's my future wife. It wasn't easy for me to fall in love with a wife who hasn't married into the family yet." Xiao Su choked. He turned his head and sighed. Lan Si and the others were still there. When they heard this, they wanted to scold Xiao Yao for tarnishing their sect master's reputation. However, when they saw how sad he was, they let it go. Cheng Yanluo said from the side, "If this illness is delayed, it will only delay the treatment." Dr. Lu shook his head. "That's right. Her condition has been worsening, but we don't even have a way to alleviate it." Ethereal had a flash of inspiration. "Little Yan, just because we can't cure her doesn't mean Master can't." Cheng Yanluo stood up and said in surprise, "That's right. We can ask my father for help." Xiao Yao became excited when he heard this. "Where is your father? I'll send someone to invite him." Ethereal voiced his concerns. "Master's whereabouts are unpredictable. It's difficult to find him. However, even if we do find him, I'm afraid Miss Gongsun won't be able to hold on until then." Xiao Yao made a prompt decision. That's simple. We'll bring the ice beauty back to Sichuan. Xiao Su and the others nodded. This was the best solution at the moment. However, Lan Si and the others didn't know who Ethereal's master was. They didn't feel at ease letting her go with them. Lan Si said firmly, "No, we'll find a better doctor to treat our sect master. You're not allowed to take our sect master out of North Korea." Xiao Yao's temper rose. "I want to take her away." The two of them started arguing on the spot. The atmosphere was very tense. Just as they were about to go all out, Qiu Feng stumbled over with a face full of panic. "Sect master, bad news." Everyone's expression changed. Xiao Yao was the first to react. He ran toward the courtyard with a pale face. Gong Sunshui woke up. She had just vomited a mouthful of blood and felt much better. However, when Qiu Feng saw her running away after vomiting blood and couldn't stop her, she couldn't help but feel helpless. When the panic-stricken Xiao Yao hugged her tightly, she felt even more helpless. She thought for a moment and hugged him back. "I'm fine. You scared me to death." Xiao Yao tightened his arms. He wanted nothing more than to give half of his life to her, so that she could be safe and happy. At this moment, everyone rushed in. When they saw this scene, they left Ethereal, Cheng Yanluo, and Dr. Lu behind and left. Xiao Su stood at the door, blocking Lan Si and the others' way. After knowing that Xiao Su was once the emperor of a country, Lan Si didn't dare to underestimate him. She treated him with more respect. "What's the matter, young Master Xiao? You should know the Xiao family's status in Sichuan. I won't say more. It's much easier for us to find a doctor to treat our sect master. So whether you agree or not, we'll take Gong Sunshui with us." When Xiao Su said this, Lan Si's expression changed. However, he was helpless. How could North Korea compare to a big country like Sichuan? However, he couldn't hand over his sect master to them so easily. "As long as our sect master agrees, we have no objections," Xiao Su said calmly. "All right, I'll give you 1 day to prepare. We'll set off tomorrow." Lan Si was stunned. Their sect master hadn't agreed yet. Chapter 1702. However, no one expected that Gong Sunshui would not agree to leave North Korea. Why? Now that she finally had some hope, Xiao Yao really couldn't understand her thoughts. Gong Sunshui had already taken her medicine and eaten. Her complexion had recovered a little. She was no longer as gentle as she was when she woke up and saw Xiao Yao today. "I grew up here. I don't want to leave. It's not like we won't come back. When you're cured, I'll come back with you whenever you want, okay?" Xiao Yao coaxed her gently as if he was coaxing a child. "How do you know I'll definitely come back?" The more Gong Sunshui saw him treating her like this, the more upset she felt. She turned her head to the side and spoke insincerely. Xiao Yao was stunned. She felt that she could not cure her illness. When everyone was working hard for her sake, she gave up. How could he not be angry? "You haven't tried. How do you know you can't cure her? Are you 100% sure?" Gong Sunshui looked at him emotionlessly. Even if it was ethereal, they could not guarantee it. He was not a doctor, and could not guarantee it. However, seeing her like this, it was obvious that she had given up on herself. He was both distressed and angry. There were other people in the room. Xiao Su patted his brother's shoulder. "Talk to her nicely. Don't be angry." After that, Xiao Su let everyone out. Only Xiao Yao and Gong Sunshui were left in the room. There was no one else around. Xiao Yao sat down in front of her, and reached out to hold her hand. Unexpectedly, she pulled her hand back and avoided his hand. She seemed to casually roll up her sleeves. Xiao Yao had always been thick-skinned. He had been rejected by her many times in the past. He had already trained himself to adjust his mentality. He did not take this small matter to heart. Instead, he continued with the previous topic. "Ice Beauty, don't worry. My brother has many people working for him. When we reach Sichuan, he will find you a good doctor. Just trust me this time. Don't be angry, okay?" Gong Sunshui shook her head. "I'm not throwing a tantrum. I know that your Xiao family is indeed powerful, but I can't bear to leave this place. My father said that Yi Luo must return to his roots. I know very well whether or not my illness can be cured. Maybe I'll just fall asleep. I feel guilty for making you guys work for nothing. Xiao Yao said patiently. How is this asking us to work for nothing? Ethereal and the others can't do anything about Fengling's body. We also need to find a better doctor. Ethereal's master is a world-famous doctor. As long as we find him, there will be hope for you and Fengling's illness. Moreover, you're still living well. Don't curse yourself. The heavens are virtuous. You're so kind and good-looking. They won't take you away so early. Can you come with me in peace? There was no need for him to ask if there was a famous doctor in the world. Based on his doting tone, she had already agreed in her heart. However, Gong Suanxue put away the bitterness in her heart and turned to look at him. Xiao Yao, I'm not related to you. You don't have to do so much for me. I won't leave this place no matter what. You don't have to persuade me anymore. These understated words were like a basin of cold water poured directly from the top of Xiao Yao's head, chilling him to the core. He had been hanging around in front of her for so long. Although they had never gone through thick and thin together, the friendship between them was worthless in her eyes. In the end, all he got was not related to her. He really wanted to ask if her heart was really made of stone. Why was it still so hard after he had covered it for so long? A ball of fire rose in his heart. However, when he saw her pale face, he could only swallow all the words he wanted to say. He had nowhere to vent his anger, and he didn't want to see her. In the end, he got up and left without a word. Seeing him leave in a huff, Gong Suanxue's face turned even paler. She clutched the quilt tightly, and her face was full of pain. What she said just now was not her original intention. But other than this, she really had no other choice. Xiao Yao's setback with Gong Suanxue soon reached Chu Qingyan's ears. She looked worried. How could this be? The two of them couldn't come to an agreement? Or did second brother make her angry again? It shouldn't be. Second brother doted on her to the bone. He was so protective of his children. How could he make her angry? Just as she was letting her imagination run wild, Xiao Su explained to her. Gong Suanxue doesn't want to go back to Sichuan with us. Chu Qingyan suddenly understood and said, Actually, I can understand Miss Gong Suanxue's feelings. After all, this is the place where she grew up for more than 10 years. She can't bear to leave so soon. Plus, this illness is not easy to treat. She probably wants to die. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows and didn't comment. Instead, he reached out to take her hand and rubbed it in his palm, transferring the heat from his body to her cold little hand. Don't worry about this. We're leaving tomorrow. Whether she agrees or not, we have to leave. Fengling's illness can't be delayed. Chu Qingyan glared at him. She didn't blame the big ice cube for saying this. Fengling had managed to keep his life for the past 2 days. While the situation was good, he had to find a way to prolong his life. So the big ice cube couldn't wait any longer. Both of them were important, but they couldn't delay the other's life because of one of them. Xiao Su squeezed his little wife's hand and said softly, I'm not cold-blooded. One of us leaves first, and one of us can be saved. Second brother isn't easy to deal with. He can handle it well. It's the same if we leave early and they leave later. How could he describe his own brother like that? Chu Qingyan was amused by him. But she thought carefully, then looked at the sky and made a decision. Big ice cube, I want to go to Miss Gong Suanxue's place to take a look. You're pregnant. It's not good for you to keep going out. It was freezing outside. Xiao Su couldn't bear to let his little wife go out. Chu Qingyan did not take Jiang Yi's words to heart as she continued. I have my own considerations. Don't think that second brother can really resolve this matter. If he could, he would not have left in a fit of anger today. Maybe I can turn the situation around if I go. Even he can't solve it. Do you think you can? Xiao Su chuckled. Chu Qingyan smiled faintly, her eyes calm as she said. After all, the onlooker sees the game best. Think about it. Lady Gongsun is so young, but she is able to play such a big game of chess. She has taken everyone into consideration. How can she be a simple girl? Xiao Su was silent. Big Ice Cube's silence meant that he agreed. She continued, so the best path for her now is to go with us. But she rejected it. I think she might have something on her mind. After Xiao Su warmed her hand, he touched her face and chuckled. When you go, bring Jasper and Hualing. Be careful when you walk. I know. I'm not a child. Seeing that he agreed, Chu Qingyan was overjoyed. Before she left, she boasted, Where can you find such a good sister-in-law like me in this world? Xiao Su smiled. Chapter 1703. Chu Qingyan thought that she would see a sickly ice beauty lying on the bed, and she would feel pity for her. However, as soon as she entered the room, she saw a hard-working woman sitting at the desk, writing furiously. What are you doing? Don't you know you should lie down to recuperate when you are sick? Chu Qingyan walked to the desk, raised her hand and knocked on the table, and said in a worried tone. Gong Sun Shui, who was engrossed in writing, did not notice that she had entered the room. At this moment, she raised her head and looked at the beautiful woman in red with black hair. She came back to herself. I couldn't stay idle, so I finished all the government affairs left behind. She put down the pen and looked confused. Mrs. Xiao, what can I do for you? Chu Qingyan teased her with a smile. Can't I come to visit you if I don't have anything to do? Gong Sun Shui said embarrassedly. Of course not. Chu Qingyan stopped smiling and said, There have been many people coming and going these days, so I didn't come. I came several times, but you were in a coma. I didn't see you until today. Gong Sun Shui said gratefully. Thank you for your concern. I'm much better now. Chu Qingyan saw that she did not cherish herself and could not help but say, Even if you're much better, you shouldn't waste it like this. It's not like you don't have people under you. Just let them do the work. Besides, don't you still have Jean Xian? You are in a special situation now. Don't be so tired. Gong Sun Shui knew that she was concerned about her, so she accepted it modestly. At this time, seeing that she was still standing, she immediately asked someone to take a seat. Chu Qingyan sat down beside her, and the servant also served hot tea. She had just had dinner and could not drink anything at this time. So she put the teacup on the table and talked about business. I heard that you don't want to go to the Sichuan with me? When she appeared, Gong Sun Shui knew that she should be here for this matter. So she had already prepared an excuse. I don't want to leave here. After all, I was born and raised here, and the high priest also asked people to look for famous doctors. I think it is the same to stay here to treat my illness. Chu Qingyan shook her head and said directly, If your people could find a famous doctor, they wouldn't have waited until now. It had been so many years, and if it could be found, it would have long been cured. It wouldn't have dragged on until now. Gong Sun Shui was stunned. She didn't expect her to see through her so quickly. Thinking about how Big Ice Cube only wanted her to stay for an hour, Chu Qingyan decided not to beat around the bush. She looked at Gong Sunshui seriously and said, Lady Gong Sunshui, we have known each other for more than half a year, and I have always treated you as a friend. Can you tell me the truth? Are you really staying because of these reasons, or do you have other difficulties? Regardless of whether or not Xiao Yao was the reason, she really liked this girl who was as pure as ice and as pure as jade. Whether it was her nature or her character, she felt that she was very good. When they first met, she liked her, so she couldn't bear to see her wither at such a beautiful age. Chu Qingyan's question stunned Gong Sun Shui. This was the first time she had met someone who was so direct with her words. When she regained her composure, she wanted to dodge the question, but she could not ignore Chu Qingyan's obvious concern. She really liked this girl in front of her. She was straightforward when she needed to be, cunning when she needed to be. She lived a carefree life, just like the stars in the sky, the horses in the grasslands, and the birds in the sea. She lived a life that Gong Sun Shui yearned for, and it made Gong Sun Shui envious. Actually, at this point, the Sun Clan and the Moon Clan are just a responsibility to me. They are not shackles that prevent me from leaving. My parents are no longer alive, so wherever I go, I have no restrictions. I can go wherever I want. It's just that. Gong Sun Shui smiled and said self-deprecatingly, It's just that when I'm no longer the young sect leader, my life doesn't allow me to be willful. It's as if the heavens want to take my life after I've completed my mission. I don't know if I can live for 1 more day or 2 more hours. I will only be a burden to others. Why bother? The last 3 words couldn't be any lighter. It was like a feather brushing past, but it left behind an indescribable sense of loss. Chu Qingyan looked at her with pity. She could understand how she felt, but she didn't forget why she came here in the first place. By others? You mean Xiao, right? Gong Sun Shue's long eyelashes fluttered. She closed her eyes and said with a bleak voice, I'm already a person who has one foot in the coffin. He still has a great future ahead of him. I don't want him to waste his time on me. And I don't want him to see me for the last time before I leave. He's a mountain stream, the wind of the earth. He should be free and carefree. I don't want him to be held back by me. She wasn't blind. How could she not see his feelings for her over the past few days? Therefore, she didn't want to be a burden to him. Only when he left far away and returned to his unrestrained Sichuan could she leave with peace of mind. Although she tried her best to hide the pain and reluctance in her eyes, Chu Qingyan still caught it. She couldn't help but think of Ethereal and Pang Zhijing. She clearly loved him, but she had no choice but to push him far away. Miss Gongsun, do you want to hear the opinion of someone who has been through this? Gong Sun Shui looked up at her and nodded. The light cast their graceful silhouettes on the paper window, becoming a touch of light in the gradually cold night. Chu Qingyan didn't leave until Xiao Su came to pick her up. Gong Sun Shui was still immersed in the conversation between Chu Qingyan and her just now. At this time, the door creaked open. She thought it was Qiu Feng who came in to tidy up and didn't pay attention. It wasn't until the slender figure stood in front of her bed that she raised her head in a daze. When she saw the gentle smile on his face, she was stunned again. She couldn't understand why he left because of her anger today, but acted as if nothing had happened. She was stunned and didn't say anything. Xiao Yao had already bent down and half knelt in front of her bed. His tone was extremely gentle. I was in a bad mood today and made you angry. Don't be angry. You can do whatever you want. Leave or stay, it's up to you, all right? After leaving the house today, he slowly calmed down in the cold wind. The ice beauty was still sick, so why should he be calculative with her? It was already the greatest blessing that she was still in front of him. What else could he ask for? His biggest wish now was that she was still alive. Gong Sun Shue's eyes reddened. Today he had not said a single harsh word to her. Instead, it was her who had repeatedly hurt his heart. If this matter had happened to someone else, ignoring her would have been a matter of course, but he had come. Not only had he taken the initiative to take responsibility for all the mistakes, he had also softly coaxed her. How could she not be moved? She thought about what Chu Qingyan said tonight, and blamed herself even more. Xiao Yao didn't think that admitting his mistakes would make the ice beauty cry. He scolded himself for not knowing how to speak properly in his heart, as he hurriedly raised his hand to wipe her tears. It's all my fault. If you're unhappy, you can hit me and scold me. Don't be angry. Gong Sun Shui bit her lip and looked at him, allowing him to clumsily wipe her tears. Finally, she opened her mouth and asked, You said you would take me to see the beautiful Sichuan and eat all the delicacies in the world. Does that still count? Chapter 1704. Xiao Yao, who was still blaming himself, thought he was hallucinating when he heard those words. It wasn't until he looked at her in a daze and saw the smile in her eyes that he was sure those words really came from the ice beauty's mouth. Yes, it all counts. He nodded seriously, but the curve at the corner of his mouth betrayed his mood. Gong Sun Shui couldn't help but smile. Her snow-white skin and black eyes were like dots of ink. She didn't smile often, but this smile was like a spring breeze blowing across the surface of a pond, sparkling and bright. Xiao Yao looked at her in a daze. Ice beauty, you look really good when you smile. Gong Sun Shui blushed at his frank praise. She couldn't help but purse her lips and restrain her smile, but her eyes were still smiling. What nonsense are you talking about? Seeing her blushing face, Xiao Yao naturally knew she was shy. He laughed mischievously, his heart feeling sweet. But after thinking about it, he was a bit worried. Ice beauty, are you really willing to return to the Sichuan with me? Gong Sun Shui saw through his thoughts and nodded. I also want to see the place where you live. Xiao Yao was in a good mood and reached out to hug her. When you get to the Sichuan and recover from your illness, I'll take you to see Jiangnan's small bridges and flowing water, the desert smoke, the surging rivers and seas, and the countless flowers, plants, birds and beasts. Do you know? There's a pond in my mansion. Gong Sun Shui let him hug her, listening to him talk endlessly, her eyes full of smiles. While she was unconscious, she wasn't completely unconscious. She had heard everything he said. She reached out and hugged him, closing her eyes and leaning against him. Okay. I'll agree to anything you say. The dim yellow light brought her back to 2 hours ago. I know you're doing this for Xiao Yao's good. But have you asked him how he feels? It's not that I'm speaking for him as his sister-in-law. I've known him for so many years, and this is the first time I've seen him put down his status as a prince for a woman. He's deliberately trying to make her happy, distressed and annoyed for her. It's not like it's always raining. How can you take back the feelings you've given out so easily? If you think that you'll be able to make him recover just because you're gone, you're truly too foolish and too naive. You can't make a unilateral decision for the two of you. That's too selfish. Who doesn't live for death? From the moment we were born, we were destined to step into the grave. But just because we knew we were going to die, did we stop living our lives? Then what's the point of living? I once heard someone say that living is probably for the sake of, when the clear spring flows by, the taste is sweet, when the flowers are blooming, there is someone to accompany, when the wind and rain is blowing, there is someone to protect. Therefore, everyone is bound to die. Why do we have to be so fixated on when to die? Isn't it better to live in the present? That soft and elegant voice was still echoing in her ears. Gong Suanxue smiled gently. Yes, she was too selfish. She thought that everything she did was for the good of the other party, but that was not what he wanted. Xiao Yao buried his head in her hair. His voice was a little hoarse. Ice Beauty, I'm very happy that you've changed your mind. I'm really happy. Gong Suanxue pulled herself away from those words and quietly let him embrace her. Her limbs, which were always cold, were warmed up by him. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her eyes were clear. There was no conflict, no hesitation and no trouble. Thus, Xiao Yao heard the most beautiful and moving words of his life. Xiao Yao, I don't know how long I can live. But if I can live as long as I can, I'll accompany you, okay? The elegant gentleman in front of her had pulled her out of the ice mountain and snow. The endless darkness was far away from her. He had filled the void in her life and made her feel no longer lonely. He had made her realize that there were many things in this world that were worth pursuing other than responsibility and righteousness. For example, freedom, good food, beautiful scenery, and love. Xiao Yao could not believe what he had heard. He raised his head to look at her. His trembling hand caressed her face. His eyes were a little misty. His voice was resolute and decisive. Okay. You'll definitely live a long life. We'll definitely live until our hair turns white and all our teeth fall out. He gently planted a kiss on her face and made a sincere vow in his heart. To hold your hand and grow old together. Tonight, she would offer her true heart and no longer run away. She would accompany you as long as you lived. This promise was desperate and affectionate. To grow old together was easy to pick up the brush, but it was not easy to finish writing stroke by stroke. But no matter what the future was, they had to live in the present. Only by loving could they have hopes and expectations. If they did not cherish the present, even if they had 100 years, it would only be a fleeting moment. It would all be a waste. Early in the morning, the carriages and horses left Luoqing in a grandiose manner. On the city gate tower, Xining leaned on Jean Xian's shoulder. Her eyes were red and it was obvious that she had cried. At this moment, she asked in a hoarse voice, "Will we be able to see Master again?" Jean Xian hugged her waist tightly. His gaze was reluctant to part. "That day will come. I hope that cousin and Feng Ling can recover soon." "We will." Separation was the most important thing. East and west flowed like water. When Chu Qingyan and the others were heading to Xishuan, a dark purple figure walked out of the mountain gate. If Chu Qingyan and the others were present, they would know that this was the entrance to North Korea. This person was none other than Higashio Motetsu, whom they had not seen for more than a month. He closed the mountain gate and looked at the scenery around him. He smiled softly. He did not expect that almost a year had passed since he left that day and stood on the land of Sichuan again. He took a deep breath. Home was still the best. Although the scenery in North Korea was not bad, it was still separated by a layer. At this moment, the mountain breeze blew, and the leaves rustled. Although it was a little cold in this winter, it carried a familiar warmth to his ears. Sichuan was still the best. Everything was pleasing to the eye. However, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a series of footprints on the ground. He stopped stretching and bent down to look. The footprints were different from those of a man. They were very small. Because it had just rained, the prints on them were still clearly visible. He saw the familiar lines, and the corners of his mouth curled up. This little girl had indeed come out. It was not in vain that he had chased her all the way here. He had gained something. Actually, he was also feeling very bitter. Every time he went to a place, she had already left. Now, even with his eyes closed, he could tell which footprints belonged to her. It was a tragic sight for a palace master to end up like this. However, now was not the time to sigh and lament. Finding the person was the key. He casually threw a signal into the air. As long as the people of the Moon Palace saw it, they would come to help. He casually tore off a piece of grass and bit it as he leaned against a large rock. His mind was a little distracted. He wondered how the little witch was doing now. Now that they were out of North Korea, he had given the order. It was only a matter of time before he found her. As long as he found her, he would definitely settle the score with her. He had seduced her but did not take responsibility. What was this? However, at this moment, Higashio Motetsu, who was filled with resentment and longing, had no idea that she did not want to take responsibility at all. Tao, haha, it's too late. Chapter 1705. Heavy snow fell, and the glazed tiles were covered with a layer of white snow. The ground was basically covered in snow, and the flowers and plants were all covered. It was difficult to see any greenery or red. A small figure appeared in the palace corridor. Her delicate little face was flushed red. At this moment, she was very curious about the falling snowflakes. She opened her fingers, wanting to touch them. However, after a long time, not a single snowflake fell. Only then did she realize that she was too far away from the courtyard. She immediately walked under the eaves and stretched out her hand again, thinking that a few snowflakes should fall on her hand this time. However, this time, there were still no snowflakes. She blinked. Was it because she was not standing tall enough? But she was about to step on the snow outside. The little child looked up in confusion and realized that there was an umbrella above her head. She turned her head to look, and her face immediately bloomed like a flower. Imperial Father. Because she was small, she could only hug his thigh happily. The adoration and joy on her face were overflowing with words. This crisp call woke up the palace servants who were standing guard not far away. They immediately knelt down. They had only been distracted for a moment just now, and the little princess had run under the eaves. She was even discovered by His Majesty on the spot. How could this be? Xiao Ho ignored the palace servants. Instead, he bent down and picked up the little one. Then, he handed the umbrella in his hand to the servant. Why did you run out instead of staying in the room? He had just finished the morning court. Although it was snowing heavily, and the people around him advised him to wait for the snow to stop before returning, he missed the big darling and the little darling. He did not stay in the imperial study and came back directly. Unexpectedly, the moment he entered the palace, he saw the little darling taking small steps to touch the snowflakes. She looked so adorable that he could not help but walk over quickly. I was bored in the hall, so I ran out to get some fresh air. The little ball was carried into Nuanyuan's arms. The smile on her face did not disappear. However, when she saw that her father was about to bring her into the house, she became a little anxious. Imperial Father, I want snowflakes. Only then did Xiao Ho remember that the little darling wanted to touch the snowflakes. He looked at the vast expanse of snow and said, "It's cold. Don't play with the snow. It's not good to catch a cold." Hearing this, Little Ball lay on his shoulder and looked at the courtyard with some reluctance. In the end, it blinked its big eyes and said cutely, "Imperial Father, Little Ball doesn't need a lot. Just one piece is enough. Is that okay?" When the little darling looked over, he had already softened. Now that she was acting spoiled and cute, even if the little darling wanted the stars in the sky, he would agree without hesitation. He stopped in his tracks and lowered his head to kiss the little darling's cheek. He chuckled and said, "Okay." As he spoke, he reached out his hand under the eaves and caught a snowflake. However, he was a person who had internal energy to protect his body. The temperature of his palm was not low. The snowflake melted as soon as it touched his hand. By the time he placed it in front of the little ball, it had already turned into a puddle of water. Xiao frowned. It was rare for the little darling to make such a request, but he couldn't even do such a simple thing. However, the little darling in his arms did not think this way. She quickly pulled out a handkerchief from her sleeve and wiped his palm, her eyes full of self-blame. Imperial Mother said that the water in the winter is very cold. Little Ball was not obedient and let Imperial Father get wet. Little Ball doesn't want the snowflake. Xiao's heart immediately warmed. Looking at his little darling, even her clumsy appearance was extremely cute. Imperial Father is fine. Imperial Father's body is strong, and is not afraid of this little bit of water. Although he said this, the little ball still firmly shook her head, and didn't want the snowflake. Xiao found it funny. Just now, she was acting cute and wanted to play with the snowflake. Now she felt that the snowflake was an extremely vicious thing. She pulled on his clothes and wanted to go back to the hall, not even wanting to look. She really was a fickle little darling. However, his heart was once again softened. Pang Zhijing was looking at the things in her hands when she heard the sound of someone kowtowing outside. Her heart panicked and she immediately closed the book in her hands, thinking about where to hide it to be safe. However, she did not have any time to react as the person was already outside the door. She saw the cushion beside her and immediately stuffed the book inside in a fluster. She let out a sigh of relief and prepared to straighten her clothes to welcome the person who came back. However, just as she was about to raise her head, two pairs of eyes were staring at her from the door. One pair was confused and curious, while the other had a teasing smile. She swallowed her saliva. It can't be. Did they find out that she was hiding something just now? Imperial Mother, what are you doing? Little Ball was carried in and placed on a chair. He tilted his head to look at her curiously. Of course, Pang Zhijing would not say what she had done. She quickly changed the topic. You went out to play and met your Imperial Father? This method of changing the topic was very stiff, but Xiao did not expose her. His eyes casually swept over the cushion from before, and his lips hooked. He picked up a teacup from the side and drank from it. Pang Zhijing was talking to her daughter, but she was paying attention to him. When she saw him pick up the teacup that she had just drunk from, her face turned red. She wanted to remind him, but she was stopped by her daughter. That's right, that's right. Imperial Mother, it's snowing so heavily outside. It's already submerged 2 levels of the stone steps. Little Ball was very engrossed in talking, and she even gesticulated with her hands and feet. She was dressed in fluffy clothes, with snow-white skin and red lips. She looked very lovable, and Pang Zhijing forgot to remind her. She took Little Ball and put her on her knees, and took a pastry from the side to feed her. Although the snow is beautiful, don't step on it in the courtyard. You already said that it's submerged 2 levels of the steps. If you step on it, where do you think it'll submerge you? Pang Zhijing did not forget to teach her. Little Ball thought that it was difficult for her to take 1 step, which meant that her legs were short. If the snow submerged 2 levels, it would definitely submerge most of her. Thinking about it, she immediately declared, Little Ball will definitely not casually step on it. Pang Zhijing nodded in satisfaction. Seeing that she liked to eat pastries, she moved the plate over to let her eat to her heart's content. Xiao ate breakfast and went to court before dawn. After discussing state affairs with the officials for most of the day, he came back with an empty stomach. He had just drunk some hot tea and reached out to touch the pastries on the table to fill his stomach, but he did not expect to touch anything. Looking along the table, the big darling was holding Little Treasure and Little Treasure was holding a plate. At this time they were eating happily. The big darling was looking at Little Treasure with a doting expression. Little Treasure even asked the big darling if he wanted to eat a piece. It was really delicious. Xiao suddenly felt that in this family, his status was close to nothing. In the big darling's eyes, there was only little treasure, not him. The country's emperor who had intimidated the officials this morning was eating a mouthful of vinegar on this snowy day. And the source of this vinegar was his little treasure. Chapter 1706. Pang Zhijing was so focused on taking care of Little Ball that she forgot that there was still someone who needed her concern. She inadvertently raised her head and saw her family's thick skin glaring at her with jealousy. She couldn't help but find it funny. "What's wrong with you? Is there something on my face?" She deliberately teased him. Xiao gave a soft snort, not willing to respond to her. Everyone in the hall knew that the emperor and empress were starting to spread dog food again. They all suppressed their laughter and lowered their heads, afraid of being discovered. Little Ball also noticed her father emperor's appearance. Seeing him glance at her plate, she thought for a bit and couldn't help pushing the plate in front of him. "Father Emperor, you eat." Xiao thought it was still his daughter who doted on him. However, Big Darling took the plate back and gave him a displeased look. "You're already so old. What are you stealing a child's food for?" Xiao's heart felt stifled. He wasn't a 3-year-old child who liked to eat sweets. Wasn't it her who cared for her daughter and threw him to the side? Then he heard Big Darling say, "I know it's cold. You must be hungry after working for so long. I already had the Imperial Kitchen prepare hot soup and hot rice for you. Don't eat these things, otherwise you won't be able to eat later." When Xiao heard this, his drooping lips couldn't help but raise. He was so happy that he wanted to kiss her, but because his daughter and the palace servants were present, he could only settle for the next best thing. He rubbed her face and revealed a smile. Pang Zhijing was dazzled by his smile. He was still so handsome, so good-looking. She thought that no matter how beautiful something was, there would be a day when she would get tired of it. However, this person in front of her kept showing his presence in front of her all day, yet she never felt tired of it. Instead, the more she looked at him, the more she liked him. The more she liked him, the more she wanted to see him. She felt like she really had a man-crazy disease that couldn't be cured. Once, she had even seriously discussed this matter with him. She hadn't thought that he would touch his face and ruefully say, "I didn't think that you were such a shallow person." She wanted to refute, but she heard him throw out, "It's fine, I'm good-looking. You can be shallow your entire life." She choked. She couldn't blame him for being thick-skinned. His skin really was thick to the point of no end. However, he was also right. Even after a few decades, when both of them had entered their twilight years, he was still good-looking. Seeing his big baby's stunned expression, Xiao was both happy and helpless. He, Xiao, had lived for so many years and had never thought of living off his looks. That was why he had racked his brains and worked hard. It was very effective in the court, but it was not effective in the harem. He didn't expect that it was this beautiful skin that had played a role. He rubbed his chin. Forget it, as long as his wife liked it. Just at this moment, a palace servant came up to ask if they wanted to serve food. Pang Zhijing nodded. Soon exquisite dishes were served. At this time, Little Ball no longer clung to her. It also did not need anyone's help. It climbed onto the chair on its own and sat upright. Then it picked up its own chopsticks. Even though Pang Zhijing doted on her only daughter, she did not slack off in the aspect of independence. However, Little Ball's maturity today was not entirely due to her teaching. When she was in a coma for a few years, Little Ball was able to think of taking care of her. At such a young age, it was already very precious. Xiao looked at his daughter who was eating by herself. He was very gratified, but at the same time he remembered something. Right now, there was no palace servant by his side, so he said, "When I came back just now, I saw that the palace servants taking care of Little Ball were all slacking off. They didn't even notice that she was about to run into the snow." Pang Zhijing watched her daughter eat as she added more food for him. Hearing this, her chopsticks paused, but she continued to busy herself. "You don't have to worry. Today, I moved away the mamas by Little Ball's side to see which ones were not doing their job." He didn't expect that his big darling looked soft, but it was not easy to bully. A smile appeared on Xiao's face. "It's good that you know what to do." Hearing him mention this matter, Pang Zhijing thought for a bit, then looked at him with a shadow of a smile. Xiao was ladling soup for her. Seeing her put down her chopsticks with such an indescribable expression, his brows jumped. He had a bad feeling. Why are you looking at me like that? Humph, guilty? Pang Zhijing's mouth twitched. Xiao felt very wronged. He really did not know what he had done wrong. It was just that every time she showed this kind of expression, it meant that he was going to be unlucky. Every time he was unlucky, he would have to sleep in the imperial study. At this time, the perceptive little ball put the empty bowl on the table. She blinked and said, Imperial father, imperial mother, little ball is going out to play. As she spoke, she got off the chair again and pattered away. Pang Zhijing picked a few people to follow, before she continued to deal with the people in front of her. A few more palace maids have been stuffed into the palace. They have done a lot of wrong things. The steward mama wanted to punish them, but after checking their identities, they did not dare to move. They reported it to me. Pang Zhijing propped up her chin and looked at him with a smile. May I ask your majesty the emperor, how should the daughter of the grand tutor, the second daughter of the general, and the daughter of the minister of war be dealt with? That full smile made Xiao's heart itch. But the next words made him sober. Because he only wanted to spend his life as a little rascal, he did not take a fey. Therefore, the same thing that had happened to his imperial brother had happened to him. The officials all urged him to open up a harem and take in concubines. How could he compromise? Therefore, he brought up his imperial brother and continued his style of doing things. In front of the civil and military officials, he said that he would never take a fey. Because of the previous example, the officials did not dare to say anything openly, but they thought of a way behind the scenes. They disguised their daughters as palace maids and sent them into the palace. They thought that if they received the emperor's favor one day, they would be made a Gui Fei. No one could find fault with this roundabout plan. Then there were palace maids that fell to the ground when Xiao went to the imperial study and needed his help to get up. When he went to the imperial garden, there were palace maids that held pastries and needed him to taste them before he could leave. When he returned to the harem, there were a bunch of palace maids that shyly threw flirtatious glances at him. It was really annoying. They did not do proper things. They were delicate and needed others to wait on them. They made the imperial palace a mess. But because his imperial brother had just passed the country to him, Xiao could not be too ruthless. He sent a lot of them back to the Fu. However, because Xiao did not say it openly, the officials thought that the daughters they sent were not beautiful enough. They used different methods to send in daughters that they thought were prettier. Xiao chuckled. The most beautiful woman in the world was his little rascal. Even if the others looked like flowers, he would still think that they were ugly. Now that they were shoving people to the little ball, it was no wonder that little rascal was angry. However, half of it was jealousy. Xiao had originally thought of a way to solve this problem once and for all. He was just about to send someone to deal with it today. He did not expect that little rascal would come to him to settle the score. The corner of his lips hooked up, and he thought of teasing her. A helpless expression appeared on his face. The backers behind these people are not easy to deal with. I am also in a difficult position. Pang Zhijing chuckled when she heard this. Do you still want to sleep in the imperial study tonight? Xiao choked. He had shot himself in the foot. Chapter 1707. At this time, Xiao was already 80% full. He put down his chopsticks and stared at her. The royal study is so cold at night. How can you bear to let me sleep there? Pang Zhijing smiled brightly at him. How can it be cold? There are so many beauties waiting for you. Looking at them makes my heart warm. Usually, the brighter little rascal's smile at this time, the more jealous she was. Xiao looked at her face and couldn't help but laugh. The smile on Pang Zhijing's face froze. She stood up angrily. Is it fun to laugh at me? You really want to sleep in the royal study tonight? So you were lying to me. Xiao Su crossed his arms and teased her. Pang Zhijing was stunned. She raised her chin and walked into the inner hall angrily. He was right about little rascal. Xiao looked at the table and waved his sleeves to have the servants take it away. He then followed her in with light steps. Peng Zhijing was sulking in her room. She didn't expect this shameless person to follow her in. She turned her head away and ignored him. Xiao didn't want to be rebuffed at this time. He sat down on the other side. Peng Zhijing was very curious when she heard the rustling sound from Xiao's side. However, she suppressed her temper and didn't turn around. This Lu Xing is a scholar. His family isn't prominent. He doesn't have the right to enter the aristocratic family's courtyard to celebrate the emperor's birthday. This setting doesn't make sense. Peng Zhijing couldn't help but say, "Who cares if the setting doesn't make sense? It's just a cheat for the protagonist. Otherwise, how could he meet that young lady?" As she spoke, she suddenly realized something. She turned around and saw the book in his hand. Wasn't it the book that she had stuffed into the cushion? She had forgotten about it, because she was angry with him. She didn't expect him to be so sharp and find it. Because the folk customs of Xixian were open, when these novels described romantic love stories, they would always add some explicit words of love or descriptions of intimacy. But for Peng Zhijing, who came from the modern world, this was nothing. She had read even more explicit ones. Unfortunately, the thick-skinned man had never allowed her to read these books, saying that they were all miscellaneous books, and that it would be better to read proper books. But she was bored, so she asked someone to bring them into the palace without telling him. Who would have thought that she would be caught red-handed by him? She originally thought that this was normal, but the thick-skinned person wasn't a modern person. When she thought that the page he was flipping might be about the marriage of the male and female lead, her face turned red. She took 3 steps forward, wanting to snatch it away. Unexpectedly, he had already anticipated her actions. He raised his arm and she grabbed nothing but air. Unfortunately, her footsteps were too hurried, and her left foot stepped on the hem of her skirt. She lost her balance and directly fell into his arms. Weren't the two of them arguing right now? How could he take the initiative? Peng Zhijing immediately scrambled to get up, but she felt her waist being hugged by someone, and her whole body changed position, and was held in his arms. At this time, a scorching hot breath brushed past her sensitive earlobe. She couldn't help but shrink her neck back as she heard him say with a smile, "I didn't think that the Empress would be so passionate," throwing herself into Zhen's arms. If Zhen didn't live up to the Empress' intentions, wouldn't it be bad? What passion, what intentions? This person was purposely teasing her. She opened her mouth to refute, but a black shadow covered her and kissed her lips. Because she had just opened her mouth, it gave him a chance. His warm tongue slid in, leading her into a lingering kiss. She was carried by him, and placed on his lap. There was no point for her to exert any strength, and her entire body was leaning on him. At this moment, he was kissing her fiercely, and she couldn't push him away even if she wanted to. In the end, she was brought in by him. Her hands couldn't help but wrap around his neck, afraid that she would fall. Xiao's plan succeeded, and he softened his movements. After one round, Peng Zhijing's cheeks were flushed red. Her large eyes were moist and her lips were red, making Xiao's heart flutter. However, he knew that there were still things to do right now so that he could eat Little Rascal without any distractions. "You don't need to worry about the palace maids. I've already thought of a way." When the person who had been kissed into a daze heard this, she became spirited. "What way?" Xiao was provoked by her cute and dazed appearance to take another bite. Peng Zhijing. Was his zodiac sign a dog? Xiao didn't keep her in suspense anymore. Otherwise, if he angered Little Rascal, he would have to suffer. He directly said, "Aren't those officials thinking of finding a son-in-law for their daughters? I already have a wife and daughter. How can I delay their future? Therefore I plan to be a matchmaker for them. In any case, they've already entered the palace. In secret, they're still noble misses, but in the open they're already palace maids. I can't marry a few palace maids to the soldiers guarding the borders, right?" Peng Zhijing was stunned. Marrying a delicate official's daughter to a soldier at the borders, only he could think of such a thing. However, people who could think of stuffing their daughters into the palace and vainly hope to gain the emperor's favor weren't good people either. Therefore, Peng Zhijing didn't sympathize with those officials at all. She beamed as she hugged his arm and said, "This way, the soldiers at the borders will also have their personal problems solved. How amazing!" A trace of coldness flashed through Xiao's eyes. Those who had the nerve to make things difficult for his people, he didn't mind returning the favor. Later on, after Xiao released the news, those noble palace mates cried and yelled, wanting to go home. The officials were so frightened that they immediately used their connections to redeem their daughters, afraid that they would really be sent to those places where birds wouldn't shit and chickens wouldn't lay eggs. In less than 2 days the harem was quiet. Even the native palace mates were very well behaved. They were just short of having obedient servants written on their faces. However, this was a story for another time. The camera pulled back to the inner palace. After the official business was finished, it was time to do some private matters. Xiao stood up with her in his arms and walked towards the bed. Pang Zhijing hurriedly grabbed his collar. "What are you doing? Put me down." "Exercising after the meal." He was only 80% full just now. He left 20% of his stomach just to eat her. As she spoke, he had already pressed her down on the bed. "I'm not full yet." She wanted to use the excuse of continuing to eat lunch to escape. However, someone was very shameless. "Not full yet? It's okay, I will feed you later." Hey, how could he say such things? "I read your storybook just now. It's quite interesting. Let's try it." Pang Zhijing's thoughts of struggling were disrupted by him. "Try what?" Lu Sheng undid Cui Ying's belt. With a swish, her belt was undone. Pang Zhijing took off her fiery red wedding dress. With that, her clothes were stripped off. Pang Zhijing. He kissed her delicate lips. His warm lips directly covered hers. Pang Zhijing. "Oh." Xiao's lips curved into a smile. With a wave of his hand, layers of light muslin fell, blocking the light from outside and also blocking the scene inside. The red quilt flipped like waves, endless affection, not a moment of rest. Chapter 1708. When Pang Zhijing woke up, it was close to evening. She blankly looked at the red canopy above her head. Only then did she remember what had happened. She wanted to get up, but her entire body was sore. It took a while for her to recover. She angrily scolded the culprit in her heart, but her cheeks were red. At this time, she was the only one left in the hall. She didn't know where he had gone. She thought he was busy again. She changed her clothes and prepared to go out. Before she stepped over the threshold, she heard the sound of children's voices not far away. She tilted her head and listened for a while. Her lips curved as she walked out. The heavy snow had stopped at an unknown time. The world was bright and was no longer so dark. The eaves, the branches, and the ground were all covered in white snow. It made the entire imperial palace even brighter. The laughter came from under the plum tree in the courtyard. She followed the sound and saw 2 figures, one big and one small, moving there. The big one was wearing an inky blue brocade robe embroidered with complicated gold thread patterns. There was a jade pendant at her waist and a pair of black gold boots on her feet. Other than that, she didn't have any other accessories. But even with such simple clothing, she was still a scene that people couldn't look away from. The small one was wearing a joyous red robe with a fox fur around her neck. She looked strong and very joyful. The big one's hands groped in the snow for a while, and made a large snowball. She placed it on an even larger snowball on the ground. The shape of a snowman began to take shape. The small one bent over to make the snowball, and occasionally ordered the big one to make the snowman. "Nyang Nyang, are you going to find His Majesty and the little princess?" The female official who was attending to the side asked with a smile. The female official hadn't been in the palace for long. This new emperor and empress was the first master she served. She hadn't thought that the emperor would give up his status and personally make a snowman for the little princess because of a joke. This was probably the first time in the imperial family in the last 180 years to see this. There were many people who wanted to curry favor with the emperor. As long as they moved their lips, the entire courtyard would be filled with snowmen. However, the emperor had made it himself. It could be seen that the rumors outside were true. The emperor loved this little princess very much, but he loved the beautiful empress in front of her even more. Pang Zhijing looked at the 2 of them in a daze. When she heard this, she smiled and waved her hand. "They're having fun. I won't join in the fun." Otherwise, when he saw her come out later, he would ask her if she was cold, quickly go back to the hall, don't be exposed to the wind, and say that her bones were weak. She had heard so much that she could recite it okay. The female official didn't ask any more questions. Instead, she ordered someone to bring a chair over and cover it with a thick fox fur coat. She also ordered someone to prepare a hand warmer so that her master wouldn't catch a cold. This master had a good temper and wouldn't fuss about it, but His Majesty would punish them. Pang Zhijing sat on the chair and quietly looked at the two people who were having so much fun. A wanton smile appeared on his usually gentle and elegant face. He was making a snowman while talking to his daughter. His face was full of unbridled joy. She still remembered that when they first met, he looked gentle and refined on the surface, but inside, he was full of evil tricks. Later, he threatened her, treated her coldly, and used her. Although he did not reveal his hatred for his enemies, she could often feel the evil aura floating around him. At that time, she knew that he wasn't someone she could get close to, but for some reason, he had an attractive force that made her unable to resist walking towards him. After so many years, she rarely thought about the past. First, it was because she had been lying on the sickbed for nearly 2/3 of her time. Second, after she woke up, her thoughts were all on the little ball. When she returned to his side, she only cared about reuniting with him. Now, she saw that his evil aura had disappeared and was replaced by true gentleness. His smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. Only then did she suddenly understand why she was so obsessed with him. Back then, he often had a smile on his face, but there was no warmth in his smile. It was like a mask to protect himself or confuse others. In his eyes, she saw the loneliness of the sea of stars, the gloominess without light. It was like standing on a lonely mountain with an empty cliff behind it. Her heart was moved. She wanted to add a touch of light to his sea of stars, no longer the gloomy black and white. She wanted to rub his face and tell him not to smile if he didn't want to. She wanted to stand behind him and tell him that he was no longer alone. Originally, she wanted to get close to him, but later on, it was already too late for her to withdraw. When they first met, he saved her. When she ran away, he saved her again. Later on, she didn't know why, but every time she made a mistake, she didn't worry about being punished. Because she was sure that he would clean up the mess for her. From liking him to falling in love with him, it was just a few steps away. Now, she finally achieved her wish. His eyes were filled with a brilliant river of stars and flowers blooming in the warmth of spring. He was no longer lonely. The blooming of the flowers of the mountain was so beautiful. The little ball's soft voice sounded by his ear. "Imperial Father, I'll give you a small branch. That way, the snowman will have hands." "Okay. Imperial Father, can I wrap the snowman in a fox fur coat? I'm afraid it will be cold at night." Xiao lowered his head to look at the little darling's large watery eyes and chuckled. "Okay. Imperial Father, you're amazing. You're amazing too." As Pang Zhijing listened, she felt sleepy again and her entire body became drowsy. On the other side, after Xiao finished building the snowman, he turned to touch the little darling's face. It was still warm, so he felt relieved. He pulled her hand to his neck to warm it up. "Imperial Father, the little ball isn't cold." Her hand had just touched the snow and it was cold. Xiao smiled but didn't say anything. When her hand was warm, he took the small heater from the palace servant and stuffed it into her hand. "Imperial Father's skin is thick and isn't afraid of the cold. You're still young, so you need to take care of yourself. Otherwise, your mother will be worried." The little ball thought that she had come out to build the snowman behind her mother's back, and immediately smiled mischievously. "I know." Xiao touched her face, then led her back. He didn't expect to see the person sitting under the eaves with a smile like a flower. "It's over, your mother saw it." Xiao rubbed his nose. The little ball immediately deflated like a balloon. "Then what should we do? Why don't the little ball take the initiative to admit her mistake?" Xiao Hoxin thought that if little rascal wanted to stop them, he would have opened his mouth a long time ago. He wouldn't have sat there for a long time. But seeing the cute side of little rascal, he wanted to tease him a little. It seems like that's the only way. The little ball was still in high spirits just now. Why did she suddenly become listless? Pang Zhijing was a little puzzled. Seeing the two people getting closer, she couldn't help but stand up. However, she didn't stand firm. Her vision turned black and she fell to the side. When Xiao saw this, he immediately went forward and held the unconscious person in front of the female official. His expression was flustered. Quickly summoned the imperial physician. The little ball at the side was frightened. She had angered her mother until she fainted. Chapter 1709. With the emperor's summons, the entire imperial hospital was summoned. They all held their breaths as they waited outside. Even though the fire in the hall was burning brightly, the imperial physicians were all covered in cold sweat. Even though the cold wind was blocked outside, the emperor sitting in the hall was emitting cold air. It was colder than the wind in the middle of winter. They originally thought that there were only these 3 masters in the inner palace, so they could happily eat melon seeds and shake their legs. They didn't think that once something happened, they could lose their lives. Seeing this situation, if there was any problem with the empress body, the entire imperial hospital would be buried with her. Thinking of this, the imperial physicians felt their bodies become even colder. Xiao still hadn't recovered from the scene just now. In front of him was still the scene of little rascal with her eyes closed. He couldn't help but think of that year at the edge of the cliff when she broke free from his hand and disappeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. The fear of that time once again came to his heart. He couldn't control the panic in his heart as he tightly gripped the armrest of the chair. His gaze landed on the person lying silently on the bed. In the eyes of outsiders, his expression was calm, but only he knew that his heart was in chaos. Little Ball was curled up by his leg. No matter how the palace maids tried to persuade her, she wouldn't leave. Father Emperor, Mother Empress will be fine, right? Little Ball will be good in the future, and won't make Mother Empress angry again. Xiao lowered his head to look at his daughter who was holding back her tears. His heart ached. He raised a hand to cover her head and softly said, "Your Mother Empress will be fine." At this time, 3 of the most respected imperial physicians of the imperial hospital were standing in front of Pang Zhijing's bed. In order to prevent a wrong diagnosis, the 3 of them took turns to take her pulse. The first imperial physician trembled as he reached out to put his hand on her wrist. He thought that if something happened to the empress, he probably wouldn't be able to live. But when he calmed down and calmly made a diagnosis, light flashed through his eyes. He quickly stood up. "I don't dare make a diagnosis. You two take a look." The second imperial physician saw this and his heart turned cold. He thought that it was some incurable disease, and went to take the pulse with a death wish. But the result was that his eyes lit up and he pulled over the other imperial physician. "Take a look." The third imperial physician didn't understand, but he didn't dare delay. He quickly sat down and took the pulse. A moment later, joy appeared on his face. The 3 looked at each other and saw joy in each other's eyes. They turned and knelt in front of the emperor. "Congratulations, Your Majesty, congratulations, Your Majesty, the Empress is pregnant." The 3 of them shouted in unison, their loud voices echoing through the silent hall, causing Xiao's mind to tremble. "As long as little scoundrel is fine, as long as little scoundrel is fine." He strode forward to look at her, but halfway through, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. "What were you talking about?" This was a joyous occasion. The grand physician gained confidence and was no longer alarmed. He said with a smile, "Your Majesty, the Empress is already more than a month pregnant. Our Xian is going to welcome another young master." Xiao felt as if he had been smashed by these words, and was unable to contain his joy. Good, 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 you will be heavily rewarded." When the imperial physicians heard the good news, they were all excited and happy. Pang Zhijing felt like she had a very long dream, so she couldn't tell what time it was when she woke up. She opened her eyes. The hall was a bit dark. It looked like the sky was already dark. She felt her throat was a bit dry and pursed her lips to drink some water. At this time, a cup of warm water was brought to her lips. She didn't refuse and drank it. After drinking it, she came back to life. She blinked and turned her head. She saw Xiao standing by her bed with a cup in his hand. She was scared. She wasn't scared because he appeared and disappeared like a ghost, but because of the silly smile on his face. It was like he had won 5 million, like he had received some treasure. Anyway, it wasn't his usual yuppie style. What's wrong with you? Was he stimulated by something? However, the answer she got was a tight hug. She almost couldn't breathe from the hug. When she wanted to ask him what was wrong with him, he gave her the answer. Big baby, I'm going to be a father again. That joy was so strong that it couldn't be ignored. Become a father? Did that mean she was going to be a mother again? Peng Zhijing was in a daze in his arms, followed by a heart full of joy. At this time, Xiao had already let go of her. He looked down and saw her touching her belly with a loving and gentle expression. He couldn't help but reach out and place his hand on the back of her hand. That was the child she was pregnant with. Peng Zhijing looked up to say something to him, but she was covered in kisses. After they separated, Xiao hugged her tightly and said in a low voice, "When you fainted, I was very scared." Peng Zhijing finally remembered what happened under the roof. She felt guilty and leaned into his arms. "I made you worry." Xiao kissed her hair. His heart had been hanging high up in the air, until the imperial physician announced the good news. Only then did he feel relieved. At that time, I was thinking that if anything happened to you, I would go and accompany you. Peng Zhijing's eyes reddened when she heard this. She tried hard not to let her tears fall. Don't forget that you are the emperor. So what if I'm the emperor? If you don't have a wife, what's the point of having a country? He had thought about it. If she left, he didn't want anything. He didn't want his home, he didn't want his country, he didn't want the world. He would accompany her to the ends of the earth, heaven, and hell. That won't happen. I will accompany you for the rest of my life. She cupped his face and planted a heavy kiss on his cheek. Xiao held her head and kissed her back deeply. After a while, little Leatherball ran in. Imperial Mother, what is a child? After knowing that Imperial Mother was fine, little Leatherball's face was full of smiles. She couldn't help but ask when she thought of what the palace servants said. The little doll was full of curiosity and spoke like a child. Peng Zhijing took her hand and said with a smile, "It means that little Leatherball will be an older sister in the future." Little Leatherball's eyes widened and she looked around. Where? Peng Zhijing placed her hand on her belly, which was still very flat, and said in a warm voice, "The baby is still in Imperial Mother's belly. It will be able to come out and greet you in 9 months. Little Leatherball made a wow sound and carefully touched it. Then, she seemed to have made a very big decision. Little Leatherball will be a good older sister. She would give all the delicious food, fun things, and beautiful things to the baby. She would protect the baby, take care of the baby, and not let anyone bully it." Xiao watched this warm and cozy scene and his heart was as soft as water. His entire body felt warm. He began to calculate in his heart. Little Rascal had been raised in the palace for a year, so his body was more or less recovered. He didn't need those medicinal herbs anymore, so this throne was useless to him. He had to think carefully about how to get rid of this hot potato. Chapter 17:10. When Tao Tao returned to the Devil Valley, it was already the 3rd month of spring. Disciple greets master. With a faint smile, she knelt in front of a person. On the main seat, the person who was being kneeled did not look at the disciple she had not seen for a few years. Instead, she slowly took a porcelain bottle from the side. Her fingers were as white as jade and her movements were very elegant. Her sleeve slid down a few inches, revealing her white wrist. Just by looking at her beautiful clothes, snow-white skin, and posture, people who did not know would definitely think that she was a noble lady. However, on that gorgeous face, the first thing that caught people's attention was those full and sexy lips. But what was surprising was that those lips were actually purple. Her lips were raised all year round, giving people a kind of eerie feeling for no reason. Smiling lips and not smiling eyes. Her eyes revealed 3 parts indifference, 3 parts bloodthirsty, and 4 parts devilish aura. With just one glance, it was enough to make people faint. This was also in line with the rumors about the devil doctor. But perhaps no one would have thought that the woman in front of them looked to be in her 20s, but was actually over 40 years old. Outside, there were rumors that she was vicious and merciless. Her temperament was unpredictable, and she liked to gather yang to nourish yin. Therefore, if a little fresh meat unexpectedly went missing in the jianghu, everyone would think that she was the one who took it away. Regardless of whether the person fell into the water, fell off a cliff, or was blown away by a strong wind, they just wanted to put the blame on the devil doctor. But no one could prove that gathering yang to nourish yin, but her temperament was unpredictable, and it was currently on display. It had already been an hour since Cao Cao paid her respects, but the person on the seat was still playing with the porcelain bottle. The people serving on both sides were looking down, completely not caring what was so fun about the porcelain bottle. Although it had been a while, Cao Cao was still kneeling straight, but there was a lot of sweat on her forehead, and her face was a little pale. After all, the winter chill had not passed, and the ground was very cold. Moreover, they were in this valley, so the cold air was much worse. It was unknown if Cao Cao's appearance pleased the person on the top, but they finally stopped paying attention to the porcelain bottle. The devil doctor sneered. This sovereign remembered that you said that you would never come back. Why did you roll back like a stray dog? Cao Cao lowered her eyes. Master Scram is back. Hearing this, the magic doctor turned her gaze to the person kneeling in front of her. After not seeing her for a few years, she seemed to have grown a lot taller. Her appearance had also improved by a few notches. She raised her eyebrows. Your appearance has changed. You still have the temperament to argue with this noble one. You're still as stubborn as a rock in a latrine. Cao Cao smiled and said, Master is still as beautiful as before. Hearing this praise, the magic doctor benevolently raised his chin. Why are you kneeling? Get up and speak. Cao Cao cursed in her heart. How would she dare to get up when you didn't tell her to? She wanted to get up, but she realized that her legs were numb. Frowning slightly, she pushed herself up slowly with both hands, but before she could recover, her face turned even paler. Where's that beautiful young man of yours? Although these words were spoken lightly, the devil doctor's tone was not casual. Instead, he looked at her expression with schadenfreude. If she showed even the slightest bit of pain, then he would be even happier. Unfortunately, Cao Cao did not do as he wished. It was as if she had just heard an ordinary passerby. She shrugged. Broke. Although the devil doctor did not see what he wanted, he still maintained a high level of curiosity towards her answer. Broke. This noble one remembers that when you left, you made a solemn vow. Why did you scram back like a stray dog? The corner of Cao Cao's mouth twitched, but she still answered truthfully. Her words carried a hint of self-mockery. The fallen flowers have feelings, but the heartless brook has no feelings. Otherwise, what other reason could there be? The devil doctor scoffed. As expected, so you thought of returning to the sect after being abandoned? As he spoke, the devil doctor suddenly covered his face and wept. Cao Cao, back then, you were ungrateful. You abandoned this noble one and a group of senior and junior brothers and sisters to go far away with your lover. Do you know how sad this noble one was? Sad? Cao Cao rolled her eyes in her heart. You seem to have put on quite a bit of weight in the past few years. But what kind of novel has Master been obsessed with recently? Why is the style so strange? At this moment, the devil doctor's expression changed again. He sneered disdainfully. Now that you think of our good, you want to crawl back? What kind of place do you think the sect is? Before returning, she had already expected that she would face her master's interrogation. She tried her best to act pitiful. Shifu. Acting pitiful? It's no use. A faint sneer appeared on the devil doctor's face. If one looked closely, they would see the coldness in her eyes. Her voice was soft, but it carried a murderous aura. Where is he? Did you kill him? That's right, the devil doctor was unpredictable like this. She could be amiably talking to you one moment, but the next moment, you could be dead. In her eyes, if she was unhappy, she would kill. If she didn't like the look of her, she would kill. If she was happy, she would kill. If she liked the look of her, she would kill. There was no morality or justice to speak of at all. She would do as she pleased. Even towards her own disciple, she had never shown mercy. Some people said that she was crazy, some said that she was a tyrant, and some said that she was a malicious spirit. In any case, She did things according to her preferences. So at this moment, in her opinion, since she couldn't catch that person, she might as well kill him. If she couldn't obtain him, she would destroy him. Cao Cao's fingers slowly clenched, her nails digging into her palms. When she knelt just now, her entire body was stiff. Her senses had yet to recover, so she could only rely on external forces to keep herself awake. No, he didn't let me down. We just didn't meet each other's eyes. Humph. The devil doctor looked at her with disdain. I, the devil doctor's disciple, have no reason to be bullied. Why don't this lord send a few people to help you vent your anger? Do you think we should use heartbreak grass or crane red crown? I feel like we should first chop off his hand, then let him watch as his blood dries out. That's not bad either. But these methods aren't new. Do you have any good ideas? Cao Cao knew that her master wasn't just saying this casually. She was really asking her. Her master was bloodthirsty by nature. Her beauty and gentleness were only on the surface, but her methods were ruthless. Last time, someone offended her, and she directly drained his blood, then hung his corpse in front of someone's door. Cao Cao smiled lightly. I've troubled master. That person has nothing to do with this disciple anymore. If master wants to kill or cut him, you don't need to ask for this disciple's opinion. The devil doctor's gaze lingered on her face. When she couldn't find any flaws, she slumped her shoulders and said uninterestedly, not fun at all. Forget it, forget it. Spare his life. Cao Cao's brows moved slightly, and she sighed in relief. She knew that if she didn't go along with her master's wishes, then he might really be in danger. As expected, her master didn't find any fun with her and gave up on her own. Although she really had nothing to do with him, she didn't want him to be hurt for no reason. The devil doctor changed the topic again. 3 parts smile, 7 parts hostility. You returned to Sichuan 2 months ago. If you wanted to come back, based on your speed, you should have been back in a month. You've only just arrived. Do you really think this lord's place is a place that takes in cats and dogs? Cao Cao was oppressed by the aura she released, and a trace of blood leaked out from the corner of her mouth. Chapter 17:11. Cao Cao calmly raised her hand to wipe away the blood at the corner of her mouth, suppressing the taste of blood in her throat. She tried her best to keep her expression as normal as possible, but her face quickly paled and blood overflowed again. She tried to wipe it several times but to no avail, so she simply gave up and raised her head to look at the person in front of her. Master, you've misunderstood. This disciple didn't stay outside for fun. When this disciple set foot in Sichuan, this disciple had already decided to return to the sect. It's just that I was held back by some matters, so I returned a month late. Please forgive me, Master. Master was a very domineering person. She thought that she came back because she had nowhere else to go. So she was angry. After all, she was the one who wanted to leave. Oh, I'll believe you for now. The demonic doctor's expression changed, but it was even more sinister. Let me ask you, why did you come back? Haven't your wings hardened? Cao Cao once again knelt on the ground and lowered her head. Master, after this disciple walked around outside, I realized that the Devil's Valley is still the best. It can't be compared to the outside world. Who didn't like to hear good words? The demonic doctor also fell for it. Her expression eased a little, and she wasn't as sinister as before. However, she threw out another cold sentence. Give me a reason. Why should I let you stay? If you can't give me a satisfactory one, then pick one of those bottles over there. There was a well-made table by the right side of the hall. It was filled with all kinds of beautiful porcelain bottles, just like a work of art. However, beautiful things were often poisonous. So as long as one touched a little of the things inside, they could report to the King of Hell. Master had always liked to make the world's most poisonous people look beautiful. She glanced at the things on the table from the corner of her eye. She knew that there were many new things in the past few years when she wasn't here. They were probably all offered by her senior and junior brothers. She retracted her gaze and propped her hands on the ground. She bowed and said, Master, do the words from back then still count? If they count, can this be a reason for this disciple to stay? It took her 2 months to finally convince herself to make this decision. The demonic doctor's eyes lit up. Are you serious? Tao Tao was still prostrating on the ground. She took a deep breath. Yes. The demonic doctor smiled and rubbed her hands together. At this moment, she seemed to see that she was injured from the pressure she released. She covered her mouth in surprise. Little Tao, why are you so weak? Vomiting blood at the drop of a hat? Master's heart aches. It's obvious that the feng shui outside is not good. You should stay in the Devil's Valley. Tao Tao wasn't happy because of her concern. But when she heard her calling her little Tao Tao again, and no longer referring to herself as the main body, she finally heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that her master was willing to let her stay. Don't worry, master. Your disciple will be fine after taking some medicine. The magic doctor nodded. All right, get up. I haven't seen you for a few years, and your temper has softened quite a bit. Tao Tao stood up and pretended not to hear anything. After the conversation just now, Tao Tao felt that her body was not as strong as she wished. She wanted to take her leave first. Otherwise, in her current state, it would be very difficult for her to fight with her master. If she was not careful, she might lose her life. Before he left, the devil doctor suddenly said, although you agreed, it's still hard to say if you can become the final victor. If you lose, you still have to die. After this warning, Tao Tao subconsciously bit her lips and lowered her head as she replied, if my skills are not as good as his, this disciple admits defeat. Very good. If you lose, your master will prepare a good coffin for you. I won't treat you unfairly. Hearing the gloating words behind her, Tao Tao's expression didn't change. She walked out of the room. Along the way, there were many junior apprentice brothers and sisters who bowed to her. She walked straight ahead, ignoring them all. It wasn't until she reached a secluded area that she finally relaxed. Leaning against the wall, she spat out a mouthful of blood, and the pressure on her chest receded. With a pale face, she took a pill and recovered a bit of her strength. At this time, her face wasn't the calm smile she had when facing her master, nor was it the cold indifference she had when facing her fellow juniors. Instead, there was a faint exhaustion and loneliness. She never thought that after going around in circles, she would still return here. She had left the Devil Valley not only to chase after Higashio Motetsu, but also because she wanted to break away from the control of the Devil Valley. She didn't want to participate in the competition for the position of Devil Valley Master. At that time, her master hadn't been willing to let her go. He had intended for her to participate in the selection. In the end, she had used something in exchange for her master to agree to let her go. Otherwise, with over 10 years of training, her master would have killed her the moment she proposed this idea. But in the end, she had left him. After drifting outside for half a year, she discovered that she had nowhere to go, no one to rely on, and no home to return to. Since that was the case, she decided to return here. Although it was cold-blooded and ruthless, like hell, it was still the place where she had grown up. She closed her eyes, her face devoid of any vitality. At such a young age, she had already experienced the vicissitudes of life. 7th Junior Apprentice Sister, I didn't expect you to come back. An unkind voice sounded from not too far away. Tao Tao's eyelashes trembled. Was the battle about to begin so soon? She slowly opened her eyes until she saw the person in front of her. 2nd Senior Apprentice Brother. The person called 2nd Junior Apprentice Brother by Tao Tao looked at her with a sinister gaze. Junior Apprentice Brother, I recently took in a pet. Do you want to greet her? Without waiting for Tao Tao's reply, he stretched out his hand. A black-spotted viper as thick as a forearm slithered out of his sleeve, its tongue flickering as it stared coldly at Tao Tao. Moon Palace Branch. Xuanqi Zimo stood in front of an enchanting man dressed in luxurious clothes, respectfully making a report. Our subordinates have sent news. After Miss Tao Tao returned to Sichuan, she walked and played all the way to the capital city. She stayed in the capital city for half a month, and during that time, she made a trip to Mount Feng before heading west. Walked and played all the way? The enchanting man's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. He had painstakingly chased after her, but she had been having so much fun. If it weren't for the fact that something had happened at the branch and those enforcers had dragged him back to deal with it, Perhaps he would have caught her right now and given her a good spanking. However, she wasn't in front of him, so he couldn't get angry even if he wanted to. He could only vent his anger on the person closest to him. 2 months, and this is all you got? Do you think you've lived too long? Zima was so frightened by his sect master that he broke out in a cold sweat. In the past, he had followed his sect master, and had rarely seen him get angry. There were a few times when he got angry because of Miss Chu. However, he had never gotten angry so frequently. It was as if he had 3 meals a day. Zima felt that his palace master had encountered a tribulation. If he had cherished her back then, he wouldn't have been unable to find her now. Seeing that his palace master was on the verge of losing his temper, Zima suddenly thought of a place. Palace master, isn't Miss Tao Tao's Devil's Valley in the west? Do you think she's gone back? Otherwise, how could our people suddenly lose track of her? Higashio Motetsu's eyes lit up. Had the little witch returned to the Devil's Valley? Chapter 17:12. Tao Tao pushed open the door to her room. Dust immediately hit her in the face, causing her to choke a few times before she managed to get used to it. She raised her eyes and looked around the room. It was the same as when she left that year. Nothing had changed. After being stunned for a moment, she stepped in. She walked unsteadily to the cabinet in the corner. After opening it, her eyes lit up. The medicine that she didn't take with her was still there. She picked a bottle and poured out a pill. There was no water, so she swallowed it directly. The bitter taste scraped her throat, making her want to retch. However, she couldn't and could only force herself to swallow it. She closed her eyes and leaned against the cabinet. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, her internal injuries were relieved and she relaxed. Just now, she was defenseless against her second senior brother. She thought she would die without a doubt. Fortunately, he just wanted to show off his new poisonous pet. However, he wasn't doing it for no reason. He wanted to intimidate her. She didn't care about this. However, she got a piece of news from him. The competition for the position of Devil Valley's master would begin in half a month. She frowned slightly. It was too soon. She had to prepare immediately. However, the danger wasn't limited to the competition. She had to be more vigilant now because the secret fighting in Devil Valley hadn't stopped since she arrived. She waved her sleeve and a dagger shot out, nailing a palm-sized spider in the corner. Poisonous winged spiders were poisonous all over. If one was careless and touched by its spider silk, they would die immediately. There were more than a dozen rooms next to her room. She had chosen the last room in the past. Along the way, many of the rooms were already empty. Some of them had changed owners. She gently curved her lips, but there was no smile in her eyes. It seemed that a large number of people had died in the past few years when she wasn't here. Although Devil Valley had cultivated many people with outstanding medical skills, these people never walked the right path. They didn't treat people, but only killed people. Those who came to Devil Valley to save people were either rich or wealthy. However, whether they could be saved or not depended on the mood of the medical demon. If one wanted to make a deal with the devil, they had to be prepared to be swallowed alive. However, those who could come here were basically people who had one foot in the coffin. As long as they had the slightest bit of hope, they wouldn't choose to deal with the Devil Valley. In her impression, after so many years, the number of people seeking medical treatment was still as numerous as carps crossing the river. However, those who could enter the Devil Valley were few and far between. An hour later, she had cleaned the entire room. She sat down and drank a mouthful of tea. The door was kicked open. Tao Tao was still holding the teacup in her hand, as if she was not surprised that someone had come to visit. She finished the tea in the cup and looked calmly at the person leaning against the door frame. Her voice was cold. "Fourth senior sister, long time no see." The person called Fourth Senior Sister by Tao Tao was standing against the light with her arms crossed. She was wearing a light blue muslin dress, and her black hair was draped over her shoulders. At the end of her hair, there was a hairband of the same color as her dress. She gave off an elegant feeling like an immortal. However, everyone in the Devil Valley knew that this person was called Drifting Bones. The blood on his hands was like the misty rain in Jiangnan, drifting endlessly. Little Seven, I thought you wouldn't come back. The muslin fluttered as if a spring breeze was blowing. In the blink of an eye, the person was already in front of her. Drifting Bones' qigong was outstanding. In the Devil Valley, no one could defeat him. At this time, her beautiful eyes were smiling, but her fingers were already holding Tao Tao's neck. Her expression was a bit cold. Tao Tao's expression did not change. The corners of her mouth curved naturally. It was not a smile, but a habitual action. She ignored the slender fingers holding her neck and said, "Fourth senior sister, is this how you treat your junior sister who just came back? Isn't this gift too big?" Drifting Bones said innocently, "I just want to see if you've lost weight or gained weight outside. You're wearing too many clothes, so I can't tell. I can only choose the most ready-made and direct. Your neck is still so thin. If I'm not careful, it will break. It's too fragile." Only the people from the Devil Valley could talk about taking someone's life in such a dignified manner. Tao Tao was already used to her way of speaking. She said coldly, "Then senior sister should be careful. Your junior sister has just come back. I haven't even shown my face in front of Master before I die. If Master blames me, you won't be able to bear it." If the Devil Doctor cared about the life and death of his disciple, the Devil Valley would not be in this situation today. However, Drifting Bones still accepted it. She released her fingers and looked at Tao Tao with her arms crossed. Her gaze was still cold. "That's true. You're the heir candidate that Master values the most. If I defeat you like this, it won't be easy to explain to Master." She chuckled. "The news of your return has already spread throughout the Devil Valley. I heard that third senior brother has already met you. There will probably be many people who can't wait to catch up with you after such a long separation. Then I won't disturb you." As she spoke, she had already turned and floated to the door. She laughed. "Oh, you don't die so early. I'm looking forward to fighting with you." As soon as she finished speaking, she had already disappeared. If not for the wide open door and the faint fragrance in the air, everything that had just happened would seem like an illusion. She threw a piece of agarwood incense into the incense burner on the table. Light smoke rose in spirals, dispelling the poisonous fragrance in the air. This was the Devil Valley. There was no teacher-student relationship, no camaraderie between fellow disciples. Master could take your life with a flick of his finger, senior brother could threaten you with a poisonous snake, and senior sister could secretly poison you. If Qingyan was here, she would probably scold her for choosing to come back. However, she had no other choice. Then from now on, she would just live one day at a time. She stood up and checked the medicine cabinet. If she wanted to live, she had to fill up her protective items. 3 days later, a purplish figure appeared in the bamboo forest outside the Devil Valley. "Palace Master, the Devil Valley is up ahead." Xuanqi Zimo rubbed the goosebumps on his arms, trying his best to make his voice sound normal. Although the air in front of him was fresh and the bamboo forest was lush, based on his many years of experience in the Jianghu, this place was gloomy and surrounded by a strange fog. Although the sun shone in, it couldn't dispel the chill inside. The deeper he went into the bamboo forest, the colder it became. Higashio Motetsu waved his folding fan as if he didn't feel the strangeness of the forest. There was a faint smile in his eyes, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. "This is where she lives. Not bad, not bad." The corners of Xuanqi Zimo's mouth twitched. As expected, beauty was in the eye of the beholder. Even this damned place was not bad. "Palace Master, this Devil Valley has a bad reputation in the Jianghu. How are we going to enter?" Higashio Motetsu looked at him as if he was an idiot. "Of course we're going to walk in." Xuanqi Zimo. Higashio Motetsu retracted his gaze and his smile deepened. He wondered if the little witch would be surprised to see him. He was looking forward to it. Chapter 17:13. On this day, Tao Tao was studying a new prescription when someone suddenly knocked on her door. She was puzzled. The people who should have come looking for trouble had already come. So why was there someone looking for her today? She put down the things in her hands and walked over to open the door. She didn't expect it to be one of her master's servants. "Seventh senior sister, Master is looking for you." the little boy said with a cold expression. Ever since she returned, her master rarely took the initiative to look for her. Why did he suddenly summon her today? The thought flashed through her mind, but she didn't delay the conversation. I understand. I'll go over now. She closed the door and followed behind the little boy. After thinking for a moment, she asked, "Do you know why Master is looking for me?" The little boy shook his head. Tao Tao put away her curiosity and quietly followed behind him, until the cold and exquisite courtyard appeared in front of her eyes. She stood there for a moment, took a deep breath, and then walked in. "Master." She bowed to the person sitting on the main seat. The magic doctor was admiring her newly dyed nails. They were as red as blood. She had a satisfied expression on her face. When she saw the person who came, she gathered her sleeves and supported the back of her head with her fingers. She casually raised her chin and had her stand up. "Have you adapted well after being back for a few days?" Tao Tao smiled. "Thank you for your concern, Master. Everything is good. Master heard that your senior brothers and sisters went to visit you. Your relationship is good. Master is very happy. Is that so? This disciple thinks that you're taking pleasure in my misfortune. You're enjoying the show." However, Tao Tao only dared to keep these words in her heart. She didn't dare to say it out loud. Senior brothers and sisters are very kind to this disciple. The magic doctor sneered. "All right, there's no need to pretend. Master is very clear about what they did. If you're not convinced, just return the favor. Our Devil Valley is most particular about reciprocity. The so-called reciprocity meant that if you couldn't kill me, I would kill you back." Tao Tao lowered her head and responded, "Yes, this disciple will follow Master's teachings. Let's get down to business. Someone outside the valley wants to see you." After dealing with her master for a while, the more relaxed the atmosphere was, the more she didn't dare to lower her guard. However, when she was ready to fight a protracted battle, this sentence floated down from above her head. Tao Tao was stunned. "See me? Did they say who it was?" The magic doctor said leisurely. "No, but you've been in the valley for so many years and this is the first time someone has come to look for you. It's really strange. Could it be a friend you've made in the past few years?" He actually didn't report his name. Although Tao Tao didn't know who was looking for her, she couldn't figure out her master's emotions from his tone. She cautiously replied, "This disciple doesn't know either." The devil doctor raised his eyebrows. The disciple in front of him had a cold personality. After she finished her studies, she often traveled outside. He had never heard of her having a close relationship with anyone in the Jianghu. After she left the Devil Valley, he didn't pay attention to her anymore. He didn't expect that someone would come looking for her when she came back this time. "Go take a look." The devil doctor rubbed his chin and chuckled. "I heard that he's been waiting for 6 hours. Tao Tao's eyes twitched. It wasn't the first time that her master had left someone hanging. She nodded in agreement and turned to leave. "If you're friends, you can reminisce about the past. Don't forget to come back. If it's a man who doesn't like you, kill him." The devil doctor's chuckling voice came from behind her. Even though she was standing next to the stove, she could still feel the bone-chilling cold. She lowered her eyes. This disciple understands. Walking out of the courtyard, she looked at the shadows of the bamboo forest in the distance and smiled self-deprecatingly. No matter who it was, it wouldn't be him. So there was nothing to worry about. However, when she walked out of the Devil Valley and turned a corner into the bamboo forest, she saw a person leaning against a huge mountain rock. Her figure suddenly paused. She didn't expect it to be him. It was actually him. Confusion flashed through her eyes before indifference covered it again. She didn't even think about it, and turned to leave. Higashio Motetsu held a folding fan in his hand. He closed his eyes and waited quietly. He knew that the Devil Valley's way of doing things was different from ordinary people. So when he came, he was prepared to wait. He waited for half a day, but he wasn't in a hurry. He had already waited for half a day. His ears were sharp. When he heard the familiar sound of footsteps, he had already jumped down from the mountain rock and was prepared to welcome this heartless little demoness. But what he didn't expect was that before he could see her face clearly, she had already turned to leave. He immediately appeared in front of her in a flash. You're leaving without even seeing me? Looking at the handsome man in purple robes in front of her, Cao Cao was dazzled for a moment. There were some people who, no matter what situation they were in, would always have a dazzling light that couldn't be ignored. Unfortunately, she didn't want to look at him anymore. She retracted her gaze and said indifferently, "What's the matter?" "I'm looking for you." Higashio Motetsu didn't notice anything strange about her. He closed his folding fan and smiled wickedly. "Why are you looking for me?" She still asked indifferently. At this time, even Higashio Motetsu, who was immersed in the joy of reuniting with her, also noticed that she was different. She was still the same person, but there was no smile in her eyes. Her expression was cold and her voice was flat. She looked at him as if she was looking at a stranger. Moreover, when he approached, she took a step back without leaving a trace. Only when they were separated by a distance did she raise her head to talk to him. "Cao Cao, you." For a moment he forgot what to say. "If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. Don't go near the Devil's Valley in the future." She didn't look at him and directly walked past him. However, when she brushed past him, he suddenly reached out and grabbed her arm. His strength wasn't too strong or light, but she couldn't shake him off. She stopped and said indifferently, "Is there anything else?" Higashio Motetsu looked at her from the side. "Are you angry with me?" Thinking of how sad she was when she left, his heart softened and he asked softly. No. She didn't care anymore, so why would she be angry? Her answer was simple and concise. Higashio Motetsu subconsciously touched his nose. It was obvious that she was angry, which was why she was so cold to him. He smiled, his phoenix eyes clear and untainted. He said seriously, "I was wrong before. I hurt you. I apologize to you." Cao Cao was slightly stunned. Seeing him standing in front of her with a smile and apologizing to her for the past, this was a scene she had never imagined. This was the first time she saw him smile so beautifully at her. But things had changed a long time ago, hadn't they? She nodded. "I accept your apology." As she spoke, when he smiled and his strength weakened, she withdrew her hand and looked up at him. Her voice was very soft. "Young Master Dongting, I saved your life. You've been pestered by me for several years, so the favor is cancelled out. From now on, we don't owe each other anything." The smile on his face froze. He looked at his empty hand, as if something had disappeared with it. He looked at the beautiful woman in front of him. He didn't know why, but although the distance between them was very close, he felt that they were very far apart. So far that he felt a little flustered. Chapter 17:14. Just as she was about to leave again, he no longer cared about anything else and reached out to block her path. "Cao Cao, listen to me. I didn't go to Luoqing with Qing Yan and the rest. After you left, I've been looking for you." "So what?" Cao Cao looked at him with some confusion. Dongting Wang Yu didn't know if it was because her eyes were too calm, or because her emotions were too distant. Dongting Wang Yu couldn't help but take a step forward. She wanted to hold her hand, but she frowned and avoided it. There was a hint of impatience in her eyes. Although he was rejected, he didn't show too much disappointment. Instead, he met her eyes and said softly, "You were angry that I didn't bring you to Luoqing. Later on, I didn't go. Can you calm down now?" Cao Cao looked at his serious expression and finally felt tired. When you liked someone, your eyes would be filled with spring flowers. Although I like you, it has nothing to do with you. But how could it have nothing to do with you? When the wind blows, the clouds move. When the leaves fall, the water ripples. You will be happy because of his words, your feet stepping on cotton and your heart fluttering. And it is also possible that because of his words, your love will collapse like crushing dry twigs into autumn. At this moment, she felt that her heart had already entered autumn and was soaked in frost. She looked up and curled her lips slightly, but her words were like winter in the 12th lunar month. "Do you think I left because of that reason? You'll never understand. In the future, you don't need to understand. I still have things to do, so I won't take up your time. Don't step into the Devil's Valley in the future." After she finished speaking, She didn't look at him anymore. Instead, she walked past him and walked out of the bamboo forest. He raised his hand to hold her, but the elegant hem of her clothes flowed past his fingertips like water and left in an instant. A gust of mountain wind blew past, blowing up their clothes and making them dance in the air. They were entangled for a short while, but they soon separated and went further and further away. Higashio Motetsu turned around when she left. He watched her slim figure slowly walk into the misty white fog. It was as if she was walking out of his life just like that, step by step. In that instant, his heart was empty, and in a place where he couldn't see, 2 lines of tears flowed down from her bright eyes. I only want your attention and care, but you won't understand. Since he didn't understand, why did he come? Why don't you go far away and never appear in front of me again? Just like that, he watched her walk out of the bamboo forest until she disappeared. Higashio Motetsu's heart was filled with boundless emptiness. At this moment, Xuanqi Zimo scratched his head and walked out. He cautiously asked, "Palace Lord, you're letting Miss Tao Tao leave just like that?" Previously, he had been accompanying the Palace Lord. When Miss Tao Tao came, he found a place to hide, afraid that he would disturb the two of them. Thus he turned into a large, shining lantern. Unfortunately, who would have thought that things would turn out like this in the end? This was the first time he saw the Palace Lord being rejected by a girl. Would the Palace Lord be angry and beat him up? Higashio Motetsu retracted his gaze and restrained his emotions. He knocked him with his folding fan and raised his eyebrows. "If you don't let her go, I can't stop her." Xuanqi Zimo covered his head as he cautiously probed. "Palace Master, are you planning to give up?" As soon as he finished speaking, he was knocked on the head again. He really couldn't speak of his suffering. He only heard the person in front of him reply, "Give up? I, Higashio Motetsu, have never had such a word in my life." His voice was bewitching and his tone was firm. "Then what is the Palace Lord planning to do?" Upon hearing that the sect master was planning to chase after his wife, Xuanqi Zimo's eyes lit up. He immediately became excited. It was rare to see the Palace Lord so proactive. He immediately said, "If there's anything you need this subordinate to do, please tell me." Higashio Motetsu's eyes flickered. His phoenix eyes were captivating. He unfolded his folding fan, looking elegant and suave. "Of course it's using this young master's beauty." "Ah." Xuanqi Zimo didn't expect this answer. He was dumbfounded. Higashio Motetsu rubbed his chin and revealed a sly smile. He lifted his leg and kicked his dumbfounded subordinate. "Go to the Devil's Valley and inquire about the little witch. Hurry." Xuanqi Zimo reacted. "Palace Lord, are you planning to pester me?" Higashio Motetsu looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Xuanqi Zimo felt goosebumps all over his body. He immediately raised his hands in surrender. There was no need for orders. He went to inquire about the little witch himself. When he was the only one left in the bamboo forest, he waved his folding fan and snorted. "Little witch, don't think that you can send this young master away like this. Do you think this young master is an inn? You can come and go as you please. This young master doesn't believe that he can't cure you. He had already thought about it on the way here. If she didn't forgive him, he would use the same method that she had used on him back then on her. He had plenty of time to waste with her anyway." Tao Tao didn't know what he was thinking. She returned to the Devil's Valley, exhausted. As expected, she was summoned by her master again and asked about the visitor's identity. She evaded the question with a few words. Fortunately, her master was in a hurry to see the newly cultivated poisonous creatures. He didn't pester her for long and let her go. However, there was still an uninvited guest waiting for her in front of her door. Fourth senior sister, she called out in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Piaogu smiled gently, but her eyes were cold. Seventh junior sister went to see a guest just now? Why didn't you invite him in? As she spoke, she peeked behind her and expressed her disappointment when she didn't see anyone. Tao Tao wasn't surprised that fourth senior sister knew that someone was looking for her. She repeated what she had said to her master. "Yes, a friend passed by the Devil's Valley and came to visit. He has already left." Piaogu didn't ask further. She didn't come here for this, and was just asking casually. She clasped her fingers on her arm and raised her chin. Eldest senior sister said yesterday that she wanted to compete with you. How are your preparations going? This was fourth senior sister's true purpose. Tao Tao replied indifferently, I'm preparing. However, eldest senior sister said that the competition will be held the day after tomorrow. There's still time. Piaogu nodded. Suddenly, a dark light flashed in her eyes. I heard that eldest senior sister is bringing out a new product that was developed in recent years. You have to prepare well. She didn't wait for Tao Tao's response and left gracefully. Tao Tao frowned. Fourth senior sister was obviously here to kick her when she was down. However, she also provided a clue. It seemed that she had to hurry. In the Devil's Valley, everyone was either immersed in making medicine or learning from each other. However, learning from each other wasn't like a martial arts competition. They could lose their lives at any moment. The next day, after she got up, she checked her medicine storage and found a huge problem. She hadn't been here for a few years and many of the dried herbs were damp and moldy. It seemed that she had to go out of the valley and find some herbs to replenish her supplies. Otherwise, she would be stretched thin on the day of the competition. The Devil's Valley was deep in the mountains. There were trees and birds everywhere. There were also many rare herbs. The people in the valley often went out to find herbs. She acted immediately. After breakfast, she carried the medicine basket out of the valley. However, when she passed by the bamboo forest, she saw a person standing against the light and surrounded by a purple aura. Chapter 17:15. The morning sun shone on his body, covering him with a layer of fluffy balls of light that danced on his hair, shoulders, and sleeves. The light was a little dazzling, and his entire person had merged into the circle of light. His appearance and expression could not be seen clearly, but with so many years of interaction, there was no need to look to know that his face was rippling with an infuriating smile. She never thought that he wouldn't leave and would stay until now. But why did he stay? She didn't want to delve into it and didn't want to know. Tao Tao looked away. The bamboo forest was the only way out of the valley, so she continued to walk forward. She slowly walked closer. Even if she didn't look at him, she couldn't help but see him from the corner of her eyes. As she got closer, the light slowly faded and she could clearly see his expression. A gentleman like jade, hair like ink, and a smile like the spring breeze. But she knew better than anyone that the owner of this skin was a complete evildoer. The moment she appeared in the bamboo forest, he had already seen her. She was still the same as half a year ago, but because he was busy talking to her yesterday, he didn't notice that she had lost quite a bit of weight. Her eyes were already big, but with her cheeks missing, it made her eyes seem even bigger. They were moist and made people want to take pity on her. He liked her past appearance even more. Her cheeks were chubby and soft when he pinched them. Thinking like this, he was a bit fascinated. He only came back to his senses when she walked in front of him. Morning. His enthusiastic greeting was met with the other party brushing past him, as if he was nothing but air. He took back his hand and rubbed his chin. There wasn't any disappointment on his face as he followed her footsteps. Looking at the basket on her shoulder, he continued. Have you eaten? Are you going out to pick herbs? Tao Tao ignored him and continued to walk forward. Not getting a response, Higashio Motetsu wasn't angry. He reached out to take her basket. I'll help you carry it. Tao Tao took a step to the side, increasing the distance between them. She pursed her lips and continued to walk. Looking at his empty hand, he shrugged his shoulders and continued to follow her. Out of the bamboo forest, seeing that the person behind her was still persistently following her, Tao Tao's patience was reaching its limit. She thought that a proud person like him would be so angry that he would leave after being humiliated one after another. She didn't expect him to still be so persistent. She stopped and turned to look at him. She said impatiently, "Why are you following me?" Seeing that her mood had changed and that she no longer treated him as a stranger or heir, Higashio Motetsu was delighted, but he didn't dare to show it on his face. He tapped the folding fan in his hand, frivolous smile. "I'm not following you. I'm just enjoying the scenery." and coincidentally, were both test walkings. The corner of Tao Tao's eyes twitched slightly. This person had been looking around since the beginning, as if he was really enjoying the scenery. She was in no position to say anything. After thinking for a while, she said, "In that case, young Master Dongting, please go first. I want to rest." She stood to the side and waited for him to go first. Then she would choose the opposite direction. However, there were policies and countermeasures. If she didn't leave, he wouldn't leave either. He even fanned himself and looked around. Those who didn't know the inside story would think that he was a rich young master on a scenic tour. The scene lasted for a while. Tao Tao's eyes turned cold. She didn't want to waste time with him anymore. She tightened the basket on her shoulder, gathered her inner energy, and flew forward using her qinggong. However, she heard the sound of clothes fluttering behind her. She turned around and saw the evildoer following her leisurely. She secretly gritted her teeth. This person's martial arts were much higher than hers. It was impossible for him to escape using qinggong. She floated to the ground and turned to look at him coldly. "What are you trying to do?" "I'm not trying to do anything." "Then don't follow me." Perhaps it was the coldness in her eyes that made his heart tremble. Higashio Motetsu closed his folding fan and looked at her with his hands behind his back. "Didn't you follow me like this in the past? Could it be that only officials are allowed to set fires and commoners aren't allowed to light lamps?" When he said this, he didn't have any other meaning, but it was very harsh in her ears. It was as if he was reminding her of her shameless past. Her face turned red and she flew into a rage out of humiliation. "All right, as you wish. Just treat it as me paying you back." After she said this, she didn't care if he was still following behind her. She walked forward in large strides and didn't look back. He could hear her gritting her teeth and couldn't help rubbing his nose. He didn't want to make her angry, so how did he end up making a fool of himself? Thinking of the time when he insisted on returning to the capital, she was afraid that his injuries would relapse. She also followed him like this. She couldn't chase him away or scolded him. Thinking about her current situation, wasn't he doing what she did in the past? Right now, she was just like him in the past. She was impatient and very irritated. Higashio Motetsu, who had been given the cold shoulder, couldn't help sighing in his heart. It really was retribution. But even so, he wasn't willing to stop and continued to follow the person in front of him. Because he knew that if he left like this, he wouldn't be able to obtain her forgiveness in this lifetime. At this time, he suddenly understood that in the past, when she chased him like this, her heart had suffered a lot of grievances, helplessness, and expectations. Moreover, she was still a girl. He couldn't help scolding himself. There was a rogue following behind her. Although she wanted to ignore him, she couldn't ignore him. When she reached a mountain where she used to pick herbs, she was familiar with the path and picked 1 or 2 herbs. She didn't know what the person behind her was doing, but the sound of rustling clothes brushing through the grass could be heard from far away. Here. She didn't want to turn around, but a pair of slender white fingers reached out in front of her with several stalks of grass in his palm. She frowned as she looked at him, not understanding what he wanted to do. Meeting her gaze, Higashio Motetsu gave an uncomfortable cough and said, "I just saw these stalks and they looked like the ones you just picked." Hearing this, Tao Tao looked at the grass in his hand seriously. To be exact, it was a weed. "You're wrong. That's not 7-star grass, nor is it a medicinal herb." Higashio Motetsu was stunned when he heard this. His gaze swept over the 7-star grass in her basket. Although they looked similar, upon closer inspection, there were differences. For example, the leaves of the 7-star grass were serrated, while his were rounded. Suddenly, the Moon Palace sect master, who had always prided herself on being omnipotent, wished she could become transparent under the sun. In all her life, she had never been so embarrassed. Seeing his face slightly flushed and his eyes drifting, although she had already decided to let go of her feelings for him, she still couldn't help but want to laugh. March, the end of winter, the beginning of spring. All living things came back to life, and hibernation was lifted. Under the grass, a dark green snake was disturbed from its sleep and slowly approached the two of them. She suppressed her laughter and coldly said, "Go, don't follow me anymore. At this moment, the person holding the nameless weed suddenly pounced on her. Be careful. Chapter 17:16. Before Tao Tao could understand what was going on, she was pulled over and thrown to the side. The two of them fell down heavily. Fortunately, there was a thick layer of grass underneath them. Otherwise, their internal organs would have been displaced by the fall. When she regained her senses from the darkness, her entire body was still in his embrace. Only then did she remember that when he had pounced on her, he had directly pulled her into his embrace, and then turned his body to protect her. In her daze, she seemed to have heard him muffled a groan. Therefore, she was now lying in his arms in a very ambiguous position. This situation made her feel at a loss. She placed both her hands on his chest and wanted to get up, but the strength of his grip on her waist made her involuntarily bounce back. She flew into a rage out of humiliation and pushed him. Hey, let go of me. Ever since they had fallen down, he had been carefully protecting her to prevent her from getting hurt. Now that he saw that her face was rosy, and she still had the energy to throw a tantrum, there shouldn't be any problem. He curved his lips but didn't let go. He freed his other hand and raised it to stroke the stray hair on her forehead that had been blown by the wind. He said with a smile, "We haven't had a proper conversation since yesterday. I think this is pretty good. At least it's a good way to talk." Was he hinting at her ignoring him? Tao Tao pursed her lips. This person had the nerve to say that. She had clearly drawn the line between them and said that she wouldn't see him again. What was he like now? Back then, no matter how much she hinted at him, he didn't respond. Now that she had turned around and left, why did he come over? This was really boring, okay? She felt very tired. Even hearing his voice made her feel tired. She lowered her eyes to look at him. Her eyes were like a pool of stagnant water without ripples. Higashio Motetsu met her eyes, and was slightly stunned. The smile on his lips slowly disappeared, and he couldn't help but loosen his grip on her waist. Higashio Motetsu, I really don't want to see you again, and I don't want to talk to you anymore. Why can't you understand? Or are you deliberately acting dumb? Do you think it's interesting for us to be like this? After she finished speaking, she placed her hands on the ground and flipped over. After standing still, she looked down at him condescendingly. Her tone was very indifferent. He had never seen such an unreasonable side of her. Ever since they had met, she had always had a smile on her face. Even if she had angered him, she would always beg for mercy with a smile, as if she had never been worried. This side of her was very unfamiliar, and it made him flustered. He moved his fingers and frowned slightly. In the end, he maintained his previous posture and smiled evilly. All right, since you don't want to see me now, then leave. I'll look for you again when you've calmed down. Tao Tao felt as if she had used all her strength to hit cotton, and there was no effect at all. She was a little annoyed, but when she saw the smile in his eyes, it was like a whirlpool that could inadvertently suck people in and drown them in his beautiful peach forest. She pursed her lips and looked away, not wanting to argue with him. Otherwise, she would be implicated again. She snorted softly, picked up the basket that had fallen on the ground, and turned to leave in large strides. Seeing her turn and leave without hesitation, Higashio Motetsu helplessly smiled bitterly. At this moment, the poison that he had suppressed with his inner energy had completely erupted. His cheeks were pale white, and his lips were purplish green. He scanned his surroundings. The culprit had already disappeared. He snorted coldly, feeling weak all over. He wanted to stand up, but he could not. It seemed that he had to call Zimo. He struggled to reach into his chest, wanting to take out the signal strip. At this moment, a black shadow covered him. He raised his eyebrows and looked up. It was Tao Tao who had returned. The corner of his mouth raised. Before he could be happy, he remembered his current situation. He coughed lightly and said to her, "Why are you back? Can't bear to part with me?" The person in front of him looked at him with a sullen face. He continued to smile and said, "Or did you drop something? What are you doing lying here?" Higashio Motetsu was slightly startled. Didn't he just go along with her wishes and not follow her? Why was she so angry? "I'm sunbathing." The weather is not bad. It's suitable for me to catch up on my sleep. Looking at those purplish lips opening and closing, her entire body emitted a cold aura. Even at this time, he was still thinking about his elegance. Stubborn duck. She had already completely ignored him. She squatted down, lifted his hand, and examined it. Yo, why did you suddenly throw yourself into this young master's arms? So enthusiastic? Looking at the person who pulled up his sleeve, Higashio Motetsu could not help but tease with a smile. Tao Tao glared at him. Shut up. Higashio Motetsu rubbed his nose and obediently stopped talking. The angry little demoness was too scary. It was not the hand. After she finished examining it, she remembered that when he pounced on her, he seemed to have changed his body. She promptly decided to pull up his trouser leg. Seeing her actions, Higashio Motetsu immediately reached out to pull down his clothes, but was shocked by her sharp gaze. If you move again, I won't care about you anymore. This time he finally stopped. Tao Tao snorted, then pulled up his right trouser leg. A grape-sized purplish-black wound was exposed to the air. Her face tightened. It looked like the poison was very strong. Just now, he had already sealed her acupoints to prevent the poison from spreading further. She promptly pulled out the dagger on his calf, untied 2 strips of cloth, and tied them 3 inches above the wound. She lowered her head and said to him, I'll release the poison for you. It'll hurt a little, so bear with it. Higashio Motetsu looked at her serious side profile. A few naughty strands of hair fell by her ears, like willow branches fluttering in the wind. The white skin on her neck extended downwards until it was covered by her collar, and he could not explore any further. Those ink-black eyes stared at the wound without blinking. There was a faint light in her eyes, and her red lips were slightly pursed with a serious expression. He had never realized before that her serious appearance could be so seductive. It made people want to reach out and touch her. He had just moved his fingers when the snake poison numbed his limbs. It was a little strenuous. Only then did he regain his senses and reply in a low voice. It's fine. I'm not afraid of pain. Even if he was afraid of pain, she had to let him bleed. She made a cut on the black and swollen area, and soon, black blood flowed out with a fishy smell. It dripped onto the grass, and the grass quickly withered. Only when the black blood turned into a normal red color did she casually wipe the sweat off her face. She helped him stop the bleeding as she said, You're lucky to have met me. Tao Tao, don't say one thing and mean another. To be honest, you still care about me, right? Tao Tao stood up. Just as she was about to find some herbs to help him clean up the remaining poison, she suddenly heard his gentle smile. Her back stiffened, and then she raised her head to meet that pair of dazzling eyes that were dyed gold by the sunlight. She pursed her lips and said softly, Don't misunderstand. Even if it's a dog, you'll still have feelings for it after 3 years. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.